I believed I was being liberated from a heavy family meal that Easter morning until my phone vibrated again. It was not a text or an apology. It was a call that opened up the sounds of silverware hitting plates, laughter, and a prayer to which I was not invited. Then I heard my name used as an excuse. Light as wind and cold as steel, right in front of everyone. My name is Sable Thornwick, and I am 34 years old. I was standing in the center of my small living room in Milwaukee, smoothing down the front of a dress I did not particularly like, when the first crack in the foundation of my reality appeared. It was 8 in the morning on Easter Sunday. Outside the window, the sky was a bruised shade of gray, threatening rain that would likely turn to slush before it hit the pavement. Inside, the air smelled of the dark roast coffee my husband, Garrett Ashmere, was brewing in the kitchen. We were running on a tight schedule. The drive to my parents' house in Naperville took 90 minutes on a good day, and my mother, Janice Merriweather, considered lateness to be a personal insult akin to a slap across the face. I had my purse on my shoulder. Garrett was by the door, checking his pockets for the car keys, looking handsome and resigned in his navy blazer. We were ready. We were always ready. That was my role in the family ecosystem. I was the one who showed up on time, the one who brought the side dish that nobody touched but everybody expected, and the one who left without making a scene. Then my phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was a picture of my mother from 3 years ago, smiling a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. I felt a small, instinctive spike of adrenaline. Janice never called on the morning of a holiday unless there was a catastrophe, a burnt ham, a shortage of ice, a demand for me to stop at a store on the way to pick up something she had forgotten weeks ago. I swiped the green icon and brought the phone to my ear. "Hello, Mom," I said. "We are just walking out the door." There was a pause on the other end. It was not the silence of a bad connection. It was the silence of someone taking a breath to deliver a line they had practiced in front of a mirror. "Sable," Janice said. Her voice was flat. It lacked the usual frantic energy of hosting day. "Don't come." I stopped moving. My hand hovered over the light switch. I did not understand. "What do you mean? Did something happen? Is Dad okay?" "Everyone is fine," she said, and the speed of her answer was jarring. "We are just not doing dinner this year. It is too much. We decided to cancel." I blinked, staring at the scuff mark on the hardwood floor near the entryway. "Cancel it is Easter. Mom, we always do Easter." "Not this year," she repeated. The tone was final. It was the voice she used when she was returning a blouse she had worn once and wanted a full refund for. It was a business transaction voice. "We just want a quiet day. So, stay home. Enjoy your Sunday." "Okay," I said. The word left my mouth before I could stop it. It was a reflex, a lifetime of training kicking in. When Janice Merriweather gave a command, Sable Merriweather now Thornwick obeyed. I did not ask why my sister, Delaney, had not texted me about this. I did not ask if my brother, Beck, was also staying in his high-rise condo in the city. I just agreed to my own exclusion. "Okay," she said back. "Good. Bye." The line went dead. No goodbye, no apology, no promise to make it up next week. Just a click and the hum of the disconnect. I lowered the phone slowly. My blood felt cold. A sudden temperature drop that started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips. Garrett was watching me. He had paused with his hand on the doorknob, his eyebrows raised in a question. "What is wrong?" he asked. "Did she forget the wine again?" I shook my head. The motion felt mechanical. "No." "She canceled." Garrett frowned. He stepped away from the door, the keys jingling softly in his hand. "What do you mean she canceled?" "We are dressed. We have the salad in the cooler. Is your dad sick?" "No," I said. My voice sounded thin in the quiet apartment. "She said everyone is fine. She just said not this year. She said they want a quiet day." Garrett looked at me for a long moment, processing this. He knew the Merriweathers. He knew that my mother did not do quiet days. Janice Merriweather treated holidays like military campaigns. Easter was her primary stage. For 30 years, I had watched her curate this day with the intensity of an art director. There were always pastel tablecloths, ironed until they were stiff as cardboard. There were centerpieces involving lilies and dyed eggs that we were forbidden to touch. There was the spiral-cut ham, glazed with a mixture of honey and brown sugar that she insisted was a secret family recipe, even though I had seen the jar she bought at the grocery store. But more importantly, there was the audience. My mother did not host dinners for the sake of food or fellowship. She hosted them for the documentation. By noon, photos would be posted on social media. There would be the group shot on the front porch, the candid shot of my father, Gordon, carving the meat, the selfie of Mom and Delaney laughing over mimosas. These images were her currency. They were the proof she offered to the world that the Merriweather clan was successful, tight-knit, and blessed. To cancel that was not just unusual, it was heresy. "That is weird," Garrett said finally. He walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. His touch was warm, grounding, but I felt like I was floating away. "Did she sound off? Like, maybe she is fighting with Delaney?" I replayed the conversation in my head. That was the problem. She did not sound angry. She did not sound stressed. She sounded indifferent. She sounded like she was reading a script she had little interest in. I do not know. I said, "She just said, 'Don't come.'" I looked down at my dress. It was a soft floral print, something I had bought specifically because I thought it would blend in with the aesthetic my mother preferred. I had spent $150 on it. Now, it felt like a costume for a play that had been shut down on opening night. Garrett sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Well, I guess we have a free Sunday. Do you want to go out for brunch here? There is that place down on 3rd Street. I nodded, but I was not listening. My mind was racing down a 94 all the way to the brick house in Naperville, trying to peer through the windows. I sat down on the edge of the sofa. The leather was cool against the backs of my legs. I needed to understand the architecture of this rejection. In any other family, a canceled dinner might just be a canceled dinner. People got tired. People got the flu. But in the Merriweather house, nothing was ever simple. Every action was a maneuver. I thought about my siblings. Delaney Merriweather was 2 years older than me. She was the golden standard against which all other life forms were measured. Delaney was loud, charming, and possessed the kind of gravity that pulled every eye in the room toward her. She was a marketing executive who treated her own life like a brand. When Delaney walked into a room, the energy shifted. My parents lit up. My mother would physically turn her body away from me to face her. Delaney was the one who got the laugh. She was the one who was forgiven for being late, for being rude, for borrowing money she never paid back. Then there was Beck, my younger brother, 29 years old, and already a partner at a boutique investment firm. Beck was the icon. He was the proof that the Merriweather genes were superior. He was handsome in a way that made strangers stop and stare. He played the role of the dutiful son perfectly, showing up for the photos, flashing his white teeth, and then disappearing to take calls from important clients. And then there was me, Sable. I was the middle child who acted like the oldest. I was the one with the steady job in compliance analysis. I was the one who remembered birthdays. I was the one who helped clean up the dishes while Delaney told stories in the living room and Beck texted on the patio. I was the low-maintenance child. I had spent my entire life cultivating that persona. I thought it was my safety. If I did not ask for anything, I could not be denied. If I did not cause drama, I would not be criticized. I made myself small so there would be more room for them. I thought that was what they wanted. I thought that was love. But sitting there in my living room, with the silence of the canceled morning pressing against my ears, I began to realize that being low maintenance did not make you loved. It just made you easy to ignore. It made you easy to cut. "Why would she cancel?" I whispered. Garrett sat down next to me. He took my hand. "Honey, maybe she is just tired. You know how she gets. Maybe she realized she did not want to cook for 10 people. But is she canceling on them?" I asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Garrett paused. He did not want to say it. He was a good man, a kind man. And he hated the way my family made me feel. He spent half his energy trying to convince me that they loved me in their own broken way, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. "You could call Delaney," he suggested gently. "Ask her if she is still going." I looked at my phone. It sat on the coffee table, a black rectangle of glass and plastic. If I called Delaney, and she answered from her apartment in the city, groggy and confused, then I would know that Mom was telling the truth. I would know that the dinner was truly off for everyone. But if I called Delaney, and I heard the background noise of a car on the highway, or if I called Beck, and he didn't answer because he was already pulling into the driveway in Naperville, fear, sharp and acidic, rose in my throat. I did not want to know. That was the pathetic truth. I was 34 years old, a married woman with a mortgage and a career, and I was terrified of confirming that my mother had lied to me. "No," I said. I pulled my hand away from Garrett's and stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the gray street. A car drove by, splashing through a puddle. If I called, I would look desperate. I would be the needy daughter, checking up on the decision, begging for clarification. Janice hated neediness. She viewed it as a character flaw, like biting your fingernails or chewing with your mouth open. If I called, and they were all there, what would I say? Would I ask to come? Would I drive 90 minutes just to force my way into a house that had closed its doors to me? My intuition was screaming at me. It was a low hum in the back of my skull, telling me that the tone of my mother's voice had been wrong. It had been too clean, too prepared. There was no clutter in her sentences. When people are genuinely canceling a major event due to fatigue or illness, they ramble, they apologize, they give details. "Your father has a migraine. I didn't sleep well. The oven is broken." Janice had given me nothing, just a command and a click. It felt like a surgical excision. I turned back to Garrett. He was watching me with a mixture of pity and frustration. He hated seeing me like this. He hated the power they held over my mood. "We are not calling," I said. My voice was firmer this time, though my stomach felt like it was full of lead weights. "If she wants to cancel, she cancels. I am not going to chase her." Garrett nodded slowly. "Okay, good. Screw them. Then, let's change out of these clothes. I will make waffles. We will have a better day here than we would have had there anyway." He stood up and kissed my forehead. He was trying to be supportive. He was trying to pivot, to save the day. He went into the bedroom to take off his blazer. I stayed in the living room. I looked at the phone one more time. Part of me, the part that was still a little girl wanting to be picked up, wanted to dial my father. He was the softer one. He would tell me the truth. But my father never went against my mother's narrative. If Janice said the sky was green, Gordon Merriweather would admire the shade of emerald. Calling him would only put him in a position to lie to me, and I did not want to hear him stumble. I picked up the phone and set it on the kitchen counter. Face down. I am not a beggar. I told myself, I am a grown woman. If they want a quiet Easter, they can have a quiet Easter. I walked into the bedroom and unzipped the floral dress. I let it fall to the floor. I kicked it aside. I put on a pair of sweatpants and an old t-shirt. I washed the makeup off my face. I tried to scrub away the expectation, but the feeling remained. It was a gnawing sense of displacement. It felt as if I had reached for a stair railing that I knew was there, only to find my hand grasping empty air. I went back to the kitchen. Garrett was whisking batter. The smell of vanilla filled the room, masking the scent of the coffee. It was domestic. It was safe. It was just the two of us. I can do this. I thought, I can have a holiday without the performance. I poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. Watching my husband, I forced a smile onto my face. "So, waffles," I said. "Do we have strawberries?" Garrett turned and grinned, relieved to see me engaging. "We do, and whipped cream, and I think there is some bacon in the fridge." We moved through the motions of a lazy Sunday morning. We ate, we laughed at a show on television, we tried to pretend that the silence from the South was not deafening. But every time my phone buzzed with a notification, an email from a retailer, a weather alert, a spam text, my heart hammered against my ribs. I was waiting. I did not know what I was waiting for. But I knew the story was not over. You do not cancel a tradition of 3 decades with a 10-second phone call and expect the universe to settle. I washed the dishes. I dried them. I put them away. It was 11:30 in the morning, by now, in Naperville. The appetizers would be out. The deviled eggs, dusted with paprika, the shrimp cocktail, the crystal glasses would be sweating with condensation. I imagined the house empty. I imagined my parents sitting in their bathrobes, eating toast, enjoying the silence. I tried to make that image stick. Then, at 11:45, my phone began to vibrate against the granite countertop. I froze. Garrett was in the other room. I walked over to the phone. I stared at the screen. Mom calling. My chest tightened. Why was she calling back? Was it a mistake? Did she change her mind? Did she feel guilty, or was something actually wrong? Logic told me to ignore it. I had decided not to engage. I had decided to protect my peace. But curiosity is a traitor, and hope is a liar. I reached out and picked up the phone. I did not know it then, but I was picking up the knife that would sever the last tether holding me to the people who were supposed to love me. I swiped green. I lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello," I said. There was no answer. "Mom." Still no voice. But there was sound. It was the sound of a room that was very much alive. The connection opened not with a word, but with a wall of sound. I had expected the sharp intake of breath that precedes a confession. Or perhaps the frantic tone of a medical emergency. I had braced myself for a car accident, a fall down the stairs, or a grease fire in the kitchen. My body was rigid, prepared for a crisis that required me to jump in the car and speed down the interstate. Instead, I heard the distinct, high-pitched clink of silverware striking fine china. I heard the heavy thud of a serving platter being set down on a wooden table. I heard laughter. It was not the polite, restrained laughter of a television program playing in the background. It was the raucous, overlapping laughter of a group of people who are comfortable, fed, and enjoying themselves. It was the sound of a party in full swing. "Mom," I said. My voice was a whisper, swallowed instantly by the noise on the other end. There was no response to me directly. The phone must have been face up on the table, or perhaps resting in the pocket of an apron while my mother moved around the dining room. The audio quality was muffled and then sharp, shifting as the device moved, or was covered. Then, a hush fell over the noise on the other end. It was the familiar, commanding silence that occurred when the head of the household stood up. I pressed the phone so hard against my ear that the cartilage ached. I stopped breathing. "Lord, we thank you for this bounty." A deep baritone voice boomed. It was my father, Gordon. I closed my eyes, and instantly, I was transported to the dining room in Naperville. I knew exactly where he was standing. He would be at the head of the oak table, his hands clasped, his head bowed just enough to look pious, but not enough to ruin his posture. I knew this prayer. It was the same performance he gave every Easter, every Thanksgiving, and every Christmas. It was a recitation designed to impress the guests with his gratitude, a public display of Merriweather morality. "We thank you for the hands that prepared it." Gordon continued, his voice rich and theatrical. "And for the family gathered here today, we are blessed to be together, whole and healthy, under your roof, whole." The word hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I stood in my kitchen, 90 miles away, wearing sweatpants and gripping the edge of the granite counter with my free hand. He was thanking God for the whole family while I was standing in the silence of my own home. Erased. Amen. A chorus of voices shouted back. The noise exploded again, louder this time. Chairs scraped against the floorboards. Ice rattled in glasses. I kept the phone pressed to my ear. I should have hung up. A rational person would have hung up. A person with dignity would have ended the call the moment they realized they were witnessing a lie. But I was not rational, and in that moment, I had no dignity left. I was an investigator gathering evidence of my own murder. "Pass the ham." "Please," a woman's voice said. I recognized the voice instantly. It was Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. "So, The quiet day included extended family. I held my breath, waiting, listening. Then came the sound that cut the deepest. It was a laugh loud, cascading, and undeniable. It was a laugh that demanded attention. Delaney, oh my God, did you see the way the dog looked at the turkey? Delaney's voice cut through the din. She sounded vibrant. She sounded like the center of the universe. It is ham. Laney, not turkey, a male voice corrected. It was Beck, my brother. He sounded bored and arrogant, the way he always did when he was correcting someone. Whatever, Delaney said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Pass the deviled eggs, the ones with the bacon on top. My knees felt weak. I slid down the cabinet until I was sitting on the cold tile floor of my kitchen. Deviled eggs with bacon. I made those every year. It was my contribution. It was the one thing Janice allowed me to bring because, as she put it, I could not ruin boiled eggs. But I was not there. Someone else had made them, or more likely, Janice had ordered them from a caterer and claimed them as her own. They were eating. They were drinking. They were celebrating. The quiet day was a lie. The cancellation was a lie. Then, a voice I did not recognize, perhaps a neighbor, perhaps a new boyfriend of Delaney's, spoke up. The voice was clear, cutting through the ambient noise of chewing and swallowing. Hey, where is Sable? I thought she and Garrett were coming. The air in my kitchen seemed to vanish. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was it. This was the moment of truth. I stared at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light coming from the window. There was a pause on the line. A beat of silence where the chewing stopped. Oh, you know Sable, my mother's voice replied. She sounded breezy, unbothered. It was the tone she used when dismissing a telemarketer. She is just overwhelmed. She called this morning and said she needed a mental health day. She is very fragile right now. I gasped. The sound was involuntary, a sharp intake of air that burned my throat. I had not called her. She had called me. She had ordered me not to come. Fragile, I whispered to the empty room. Yeah, Delaney chimed in, her voice muffled as if she was speaking with her mouth full. She said she did not want to bring the mood down. She is going through a phase. She said she is doing a no-drama year. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had never used that phrase. No drama was Delaney's catchphrase, usually uttered right after she had caused a scene. They were rewriting me. In real time, they were taking my character and editing the script to suit their narrative. To the guests at that table, I was not the daughter who had been excluded. I was the unstable daughter who had abandoned them. I was the difficult one. I was the one who refused to participate in their joy. It makes sense, the stranger's voice said. If she needs space. She needs space. Exactly, Janice said. We just want her to be happy, even if she is a little distant. The injustice of it made my vision blur. I wanted to scream into the phone. I wanted to shout, I am here. I am listening. You told me not to come, but I stayed silent. I was paralyzed by the sheer efficiency of their cruelty. Then the conversation shifted, and the tone changed from dismissive to something sharper, something darker. Hey, Delaney said. The playfulness was gone from her voice, replaced by a low, conspiratorial tone. Just make sure nobody mentions the bank papers if you talk to her later. What bank papers? Beck asked. You know, Delaney said, her voice dropping lower, but still audible through the high-quality microphone of my mother's smartphone. The loan adjustments, the stuff for the business. Oh, that, Beck said. Yeah, obviously. She would not understand anyway, Janice added. She gets so anxious about money, it is better she does not know. She works in compliance. Remember, she asked too many questions. I froze. The temperature in my kitchen seemed to drop 20 degrees. Compliance. That was my job. I worked for Northbridge Compliance Systems. My entire career was built on spotting irregularities, identifying risk, and ensuring legal adherence. Why would my family be worried about me seeing bank papers? Why would they be hiding a loan adjustment? My mind raced. My parents owned their house outright. They had paid off the mortgage 15 years ago. My father's pension was substantial. There should be no need for loans. Certainly not ones that needed to be hidden from the daughter who audited financial documents for a living. "Just keep it quiet," Delaney said, "especially the co-signing part." The co-signing part. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with implication. Who was co-signing what? And why was my name the one being protected or avoided? I heard the sound of footsteps approaching me in the kitchen. I looked up. Garrett was standing in the doorway. He was wearing his comfortable gray t-shirt, holding a plate of waffles. He looked happy. He looked like a man who had successfully salvaged a ruined Sunday. He saw me on the floor. He saw the phone pressed to my ear. He saw the color of my skin, which must have been the shade of old paper. "Sable," he asked. His voice was full of concern. "What is it? Is it your mom? Did something happen?" He took a step toward me. I shot my hand up, palm facing him. "Stop." I shook my head violently. I put a finger to my lips, signaling him to be silent. My eyes were wide, pleading, "Do not speak. Do not make a sound." Garrett froze. He looked at the phone, then back at me. He set the plate of waffles down on the table slowly. Sensing the gravity of the moment, he crouched down next to me, his presence a warm anchor, but I could not look at him. I had to listen. I moved the phone slightly, switching to speakerphone, but keeping the volume low, so Garrett could hear too. I needed a witness. I needed to know that I was not hallucinating this betrayal. Garrett leaned in, his ear inches from mine, on the line. The sound of the party continued. "So just get the signature next week," Beck was saying. "It is just a formality." "Right," Janice said. "I will handle it." And then, as if the universe wanted to ensure the knife was twisted all the way in, I heard my mother speak again. "And with Garrett," she said clearly. The room on the other end seemed to quiet down for a microsecond, or perhaps it was just my own hearing focusing like a laser beam. "Do not let him know," Janice said. "He is too honest. He will tell her. Just keep him out of the loop until the funds clear." Garrett's eyes widened. He pulled back. Looking at me with a mixture of shock and confusion, he opened his mouth to whisper a question, but the line went dead. My mother must have realized the phone was on. Or perhaps she had just moved it to check a text message and noticed the active call. Or maybe she just sat on it. The connection severed. The silence that rushed back into the kitchen was violent. It was not the peaceful silence of a Sunday morning. It was the ringing silence of an explosion's aftermath. The screen of my phone went black. I stared at it. For a long time. Neither of us moved. The smell of the waffles Garrett had made sweet. Vanilla. Comforting suddenly made me feel nauseous. It was the smell of a life that was being mocked. Garrett sat back on his heels. He looked pale. "Did she say, 'Don't let him know'?" he asked. His voice was shaky. I nodded. I could not speak. My throat felt like it was filled with broken glass. "They are not just eating dinner," I whispered finally. The words felt foreign in my mouth. "They are doing something." Garrett rubbed his face with his hands. "I don't understand. Why would they lie? Why would they say you are fragile?" "Because it is easier," I said. I stood up, my legs trembling. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. If I am the crazy one, then they do not have to feel bad about leaving me out. If I am the problem, then they are the victims. I looked at the black screen of the phone again. The pain was there, sharp and agonizing. The rejection of the Easter dinner was one thing. That was just hurt feelings. That was just high school exclusion tactics played out by geriatrics. But the conversation about the papers, the specific instruction to hide things from Garrett, that was not emotional, that was strategic. They were not just pushing me away, they were building a wall, and they were hiding something behind it. I walked over to the sink and gripped the cold metal rim. I stared out at the gray sky. "They lied," Garrett said, standing up behind me. He sounded angry now. "They are all there. Beck, Delaney, people we don't even know. And they told you to stay home. They did not just tell me to stay home." "Garrett," I said, turning to face him. I looked him in the eye. I needed him to understand the shift that had just happened. They used my name to explain why I was not there. They turned me into a story, and while they were laughing at that story, They were planning something involving money and signatures. I thought about the inquiry. I thought about the co-signing, Garrett. I said, "Did you sign anything ever for them?" Garrett shook his head immediately. "No, never. Your dad asked me for a recommendation on a contractor once. That is it." I nodded. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. I clenched them into fists until the shaking stopped. I walked over to the table and picked up my phone. I felt a sudden urge to throw it against the wall, to shatter the device that had delivered this poison, but I did not. Instead, I unlocked it. I went to the call log. Incoming call. Mom. 12:14 p.m. Duration 3 minutes, 42 seconds. I took a screenshot. Then I opened my notes app. I typed in the date. I typed in the time. Quote, "Don't mention the bank papers." Quote, "She works in compliance. She asks too many questions." Quote, "Don't let Garrett know." "What are you doing?" Garrett asked. "I'm writing it down." I said. My voice was calm now. It was the cold, dead calm of the ocean floor. Why? Because I am not crazy. I said, and I am not fragile. And I am not going to forget this. I looked at the screenshot one more time. They thought they had hung up on me. They thought I was sitting at home, sad and compliant, eating a waffle and waiting for their scraps of affection. They thought I was the same Sable who had spent 3 decades apologizing for taking up space, but that Sable had died somewhere between the prayer and the deviled eggs. I put the phone down on the table. Face up this time. Let's eat. I said to Garrett. He looked at me, stunned. Eat, yes. I said. I picked up a fork. The metal felt heavy and cool. I'm going to need my strength. I cut into the waffle. I did not feel hungry. I felt hollow. But I knew that nature abhors a vacuum, and something new was rushing in to fill the space where my love for my family used to be. It was not hate. Hate is hot. Hate acts on impulse. This was something colder. This was clarity. They did not cancel the dinner. They canceled me. And now that I knew the terms of the arrangement, I was finally free to stop playing by their rules. The kitchen was silent again, but the ghosts of their laughter still rang in my ears. I took a bite of the waffle, chewed, and swallowed. It tasted like ash, but I forced it down. I am done. I said softly, done with what Garrett asked. I looked at him, and for the first time that day, I smiled. It was a small, tight smile. I am done begging for a seat at a table where I am on the menu. The phone lay between us, a black monolith. The portal was closed, but the damage was done. And somewhere in Naperville, the Merriweathers were passing the ham, completely unaware that they had just handed the fragile daughter the weapon she would use to dismantle them. I did not call them back. I did not throw the phone against the wall. I did not scream. I simply sat there at the kitchen table, the silence of my apartment settling around me like a fine dust. It was a physical weight, this realization. It felt as though someone had reached into my chest and turned off a switch that had been humming in the background for 34 years. The connection to the house in Naperville was severed, not by a storm or a fight, but by the simple, brutal act of hanging up. Garrett watched me. He moved around the kitchen with careful, quiet steps, as if I were a patient recovering from a major surgery. In a way, I had just had a tumor removed, though I was still feeling the phantom pain of the limb. He poured the cold coffee down the sink and brewed a fresh pot. The smell of the roasted beans usually signaled comfort, but today it just smelled like the morning I lost my family. I sat there for an hour. I watched the light shift across the floorboards. I thought about the ham. I thought about the deviled eggs. I thought about the way Delaney's laugh sounded, so free and unburdened, while I sat here analyzing the tone of a rejection. Then, my phone lit up. It was a text message. The screen was bright, cheerful, oblivious to the darkness sitting in my kitchen. It was from Delaney. Happy Easter. That was it. 2 words and a pink heart emoji. I stared at it. I read it again. I read it a 3rd time, looking for a hidden code, a subtext, a hint of an apology. There was nothing. There was no, sorry we missed you. There was no mom is being crazy. There was no wish you were here. It was a generic broadcast. The kind of message you send to a coworker you barely know or a cousin you see once a decade. It was an automated pleasantry sent from the scene of the crime. She was sitting at that table. She was wiping ham glaze off her lip. She had just conspired to keep financial secrets from me. She had just laughed at the idea of my fragility. And yet, she had the audacity to send me a pink heart. It was not an act of love. It was an act of maintenance. It was Delaney checking a box to ensure that the surface of the water remained smooth. Even as she drowned me beneath it, I did not reply. For the first time in my life, I did not type back. Happy Easter. Miss you guys. I did not send a heart back. I let the message sit there, unanswered, unacknowledged. The next day, Monday, the voicemail came. I was at work, sitting at my desk at Northbridge Compliance Systems, staring at a spreadsheet of transaction flags. My phone buzzed. I let it go to voicemail. I saw the name Mom scroll across the screen, and my pulse did not even jump. I felt a strange, cold curiosity. I waited until lunch to listen to it. I went out to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and pressed play. Hi, Sable. It is Mom. Just calling to check in. I hope you had a peaceful Easter. We missed you, but we figured you needed the rest. Give Garrett my love. Okay, bye. Her voice was bright. It was airy. It was the voice of a woman who had done nothing wrong. There was no mention of the cancellation, no mention of the phone call she had made to tell me to stay away, and certainly no mention of the butt dial. I hope you had a peaceful Easter. The sentence was a masterpiece of gaslighting. By framing my absence as a choice for peace, she absolved herself of the exclusion. She was not the mother who uninvited her daughter. She was the benevolent matriarch who granted her daughter space. She had rewritten the narrative so completely that she probably believed it herself. I deleted the voicemail. I did not save it. I did not need to listen to it again to know what it meant. That evening, Garrett found me sitting on the patio, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. He brought me a glass of wine and sat down next to me. Are you going to tell them? He asked. He had been holding the question in for 24 hours. I could see the tension in his jaw. He wanted justice. He wanted me to call them, play the recording of the butt dial, and demand an explanation. He wanted the explosion. I took a sip of the wine. It was tart, dry. No, I said. He looked at me, surprised. No, Sable. They lied to you. They are hiding money things. They made fun of you. You cannot just let that slide. I am not letting it slide. I said. I turned to look at him. If I tell them I heard, what happens? They will deny it, or they will say I misunderstood, or they will cry and say they were just trying to protect me. It will turn into a drama. I will be the villain for eavesdropping. They will make it about my reaction, not their action. Garrett frowned. So what do we do? Just pretend it never happened. No, I said. We do nothing. Nothing. I want to see what happens when I stop. I said, I want to see what they do when I disappear. I had always been the engine of our relationship. I was the one who called. I was the one who planned the visits. I was the one who bought the gifts. I was the one who smoothed over the awkward silences. I was the glue that I thought was holding us together. But what if I was not the glue? What if I was just the filler? I want to know if they will come looking for me, I said softly, or if they will just be relieved that I'm gone. And so, the silence began. I stopped texting in the family group chat. I stopped liking their photos on social media. I stopped calling my mother on Sunday afternoons. I waited. The first week was the hardest. I checked my phone every 10 minutes, expecting a text, a call, a question. Where are you? Are you okay? Tuesday passed. Wednesday passed. Friday passed. Nothing. The silence from Naperville was absolute. It was terrifying. It confirmed my worst fear that my presence in their lives was entirely voluntary on my part. If I did not force myself into their line of sight, I simply ceased to exist for them. They were not missing me. They were not worrying about me. They were simply continuing their lives, unbothered by the gap where I used to be. Garrett tried to fill the void. He took me to dinner. We went for long walks. We watched movies. But he could see the hollow look in my eyes. It is a specific kind of grief. Mourning people who are still alive. It is a death without a funeral. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner. I existed in a state of suspended animation. Then, exactly 32 days after Easter, my phone rang. It was Beck. I stared at the screen. My brother, the golden boy, the one who had corrected Delaney about the ham, the one who had discussed the bank papers. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, hey," Beck said. His voice was brisk, impatient. He sounded like he was walking down a busy street in Chicago. Wind whipped against the microphone. "Hi, Beck," I said. "You alive?" he asked. "I am." I said. "Mom says you are acting weird," he said. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. He went straight to the accusation. "She says you have not called in a month. She thinks you are having an episode or something." I felt a flash of heat in my chest. An episode. I am just busy. "Beck," I said. My voice was calm, level. "Well, you are stressing her out," he said. "She is asking me if I know what is wrong with you. I told her I do not have time to play therapist. So, can you just call her fix whatever this is?" He was annoyed. He was not calling because he was concerned. He was calling because my silence was becoming an inconvenience to him. My mother was nagging him. And he wanted the nagging to stop. I was a broken appliance that he needed to kick back into working order. "I am not doing anything," I said. "I am just living my life." "Yeah, well, you are doing it loudly," he said. "Look, just call her. Tell her you are fine. Post a picture or something. She thinks you are mad about Easter." I gripped the phone tighter. Am I not allowed to be? Beck sighed. A long, exaggerated exhale. "Oh my God. Sable, are we really doing this?" It was one dinner. You know how Mom gets when she is stressed. She just wanted a small group. A small group, I repeated, including Aunt Carol and the neighbors. "Who told you that?" Beck asked, his tone sharpening. "Does it matter?" I asked. "Look, you are overreacting," Beck said. "You always do this. You take one little thing and blow it up. Mom was trying to be nice. She knows you hate crowds. She knows you get anxious when there are too many people. She was doing you a favor." I closed my eyes. There it was. The rewrite. They were using my personality against me. They were taking my introversion, my preference for meaningful conversation over loud parties, and twisting it into a disability that required their management. They had excluded me for my own good. It was a masterful stroke of manipulation. It made them the heroes, and me the ungrateful beneficiary of their exclusion. "I am not anxious, Beck," I said, "and I do not hate my family." "Well, you are acting like it," he snapped. "Just call her. I have to go. I have a meeting." The line went dead. I sat there, holding the phone. I felt dirty. I felt used. 10 minutes later, a text came from Delaney. "Beck said you are spiraling LOL. Ignoring Mom is a bold move. Call her so she stops texting me. Also, Easter was super low-key. You didn't miss anything. Just old people talking about cholesterol. You would have been bored." I read the text. "You would have been bored." Another justification. Another brick in the wall they were building to keep me out while telling me it was for my own safety. Delaney was playing the role of the cool, detached sister. She was minimizing the event to make my reaction seem ridiculous. If the dinner was boring, then my hurt feelings were invalid. If I didn't miss anything, then I had no right to be upset. But I knew the truth. I had heard the laughter. I had heard the clinking glasses. I had heard the prayer. It was not boring. It was a celebration of a family that worked perfectly well without me. I realized then that this was not a misunderstanding. This was a system. The Merriweather family was a machine, and every machine has parts. Delaney was the hood ornament, shiny and visible. Beck was the engine, powerful and driving things forward. My parents were the chassis, holding it all together, and I was the spare tire. I was kept in the trunk, unseen, unthought of, until there was a flat, until they needed someone to fill a seat, or handle a crisis, or listen to a complaint. But when the car was running smoothly, I was dead weight. I took up space. I reduced the fuel efficiency. They did not hate me. That would have been easier. Hate implies passion. Hate implies that I mattered enough to evoke a strong emotion. No, they were indifferent to me. And indifference is a far colder form of violence. They only noticed my absence because it disrupted the image. My mother could not post a photo of a complete family if I was missing. My brother could not have a peaceful afternoon if my mother was complaining to him about me. I was not a person to them. I was a function. And when the function stopped working, they got annoyed. I looked at the text from Delaney. I looked at the call log from Beck. I made a decision. I opened my laptop. I logged into my email account. I went to the settings and created a new folder. I typed the name in slowly, savoring each letter. Static. That is what they were. They were white noise. They were the fuzz on the screen when the channel is not tuned in. They were a distraction from the clear, sharp reality of my life. I set up a rule. Every email from Janice Merriweather, every email from Gordon Merriweather, every email from Delaney or Beck. Move to folder static. Mark as read. I did not block them. Blocking them would be a reaction. Blocking them would be dramatic. Blocking them would give them a story to tell about how Sable cut them off. No, I would not give them that satisfaction. I would let them speak into the void. I did the same on my phone. I silenced their notifications. I moved their text threads to a hidden folder. I closed the laptop. The apartment was quiet, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was not the heavy, oppressive silence of abandonment. It was the clean, crisp silence of a room that has been decluttered. I walked into the kitchen where Garrett was making dinner. He looked up, gauging my mood. "Did you call them back?" he asked. "No," I said. He paused. "What are you going to do?" I walked over to him and wrapped my arms around his waist. I rested my head against his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. This was real. This man, standing here chopping vegetables, was my family. The people in Naperville were just relatives. There is a difference. I am going to let them be. I said, I am putting them in the background. Garrett kissed the top of my head. "Are you okay with that?" I took a deep breath. It hurt. Of course it hurt. You cannot cut off a limb without bleeding, but the bleeding would stop eventually. The wound would scar over, and I would learn to walk differently. "I am okay." I said. I was lying. Just a little. I was not okay yet. I was still angry. I was still sad. But I was no longer confused. I had spent 34 years trying to earn a place at a table where the chairs were bolted to the floor and none of them were reserved for me. I was done standing and waiting. I pulled away from Garrett and picked up a knife to help him with the vegetables. "Let's make dinner," I said. "Just us." And as I sliced through the red pepper, the crisp sound echoing in the kitchen, I felt the first stirrings of a new power. They thought they had silenced me. They thought they had put me in my place. But they had done something far more dangerous. They had taught me how to live without them. And once you learn that, you never go back. The static folder sat in my inbox, empty for now, but ready to catch the noise. I was ready for the long game. They could keep their ham and their secrets and their performative prayers. I had something better. I had the truth. And I had the patience of a woman who has been invisible her whole life. I smiled at Garrett, and this time, it reached my eyes. "Pass the salt," I said. The silence was no longer my enemy. It was my weapon. And I was just beginning to learn how to wield it. My 35th birthday arrived on a Tuesday in mid-May. In the Merriweather family calendar, birthdays were usually treated like national holidays. Growing up, there was always a protocol. The week before, emails would circulate regarding wish lists. Reservations would be made at restaurants that required valets. My mother would post a collage of baby photos on Facebook at 7 in the morning, captioned with paragraphs about how blessed she was to be a mother. Even if we were fighting, the performance of the birthday was mandatory. This year, the day started with silence. Garrett was wonderful. Of course, he woke up early and made breakfast. He gave me a beautiful leather tote bag for work, the kind I had been eyeing for 6 months but refused to buy for myself. He took me to dinner at a quiet Italian place where the wine was expensive and the lighting was dim enough to hide the circles under my eyes. He toasted to my year ahead. He held my hand across the table, but the phone in my purse remained dark. I checked it in the bathroom. I checked it in the car. I checked it while I was brushing my teeth before bed. There was nothing from my mother. No call, no text, no Facebook collage. The woman who never forgot a date, who sent cards for half-birthdays to her grandchildren, had simply erased May 12th from her memory banks. It was 11:58 at night when my phone finally buzzed. It was a text from Delaney. HB. That was it. 2 letters and an exclamation point. No emoji this time. No love you. Just an abbreviation, tossed off 2 minutes before the day expired. Likely just so she could technically say she had acknowledged it if anyone asked later. It felt like a penny thrown at a beggar. I turned off the phone and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the shadows. The silence from Janice was not an accident. It was a sanction. It was punishment for my refusal to chase her after Easter. She was waiting for me to break. She was waiting for me to call and ask why she had forgotten, so she could turn it around and say, "Well, you have been so distant lately. I did not know if you wanted to hear from me." I did not take the bait. 2 days later, Garrett and I were sitting in the living room. He was going through the mail, sorting bills from junk. He held up a blank card with a watercolor flower on the front. "Maybe we should send them something," he suggested tentatively. "Just a thinking of you card. To break the ice. It feels weird. Sable. It feels like we are in a Cold War." I looked up from my book. "I am not sending a card. Garrett," he sighed, putting the envelope down. "I know you are hurt. I am hurt for you. But someone has to be the bigger person, right? If we just reach out, maybe it resets the clock. We keep the peace." I closed my book and set it on the coffee table with a deliberate thud. "Peace," I asked. "Garrett, peace that requires my silence is not peace. It is submission. If I send a card now, after they lied to me, after they mocked me, after they ignored my birthday, I am telling them that their behavior is acceptable. I am telling them that no matter how much they kick me, I will still come back and ask for a pat on the head." Garrett looked at me, his expression pained. He was a peacemaker by nature. He came from a family that yelled and hugged 5 minutes later. He did not understand the Merriweather style of warfare, which was entirely silent and nuclear. "I just hate seeing you like this," he said softly. "You look hard." "I am not hard." I said, "I am solid. There is a difference." I picked up my phone. It was a reflex, a bad habit I was trying to break. I opened Instagram. I told myself I was just looking for design inspiration for the bathroom renovation we were planning. But the algorithm knows your wounds better than you do. The first image on my feed was from Delaney. It was a carousel of photos posted 2 hours ago. Caption: "Sunday brunch with the best crew, blessed family. First Sunday. Fun day." I stopped breathing for a second. It was not Easter. It was just a random Sunday in May. They were at a high-end bistro in downtown Naperville, the kind with exposed brick walls and $20 avocado toast. The first photo was a wide shot of the table. There was my mother, looking radiant in a cream-colored blouse, holding a mimosa. There was my father, laughing at something Beck was showing him on a phone. There was Beck, looking like a GQ model in his sunglasses. There was Delaney, posing with her head thrown back, the picture of carefree joy. And there were others, Aunt Carol again, and a couple of Delaney's friends who I knew she secretly despised, but kept around for aesthetic purposes. They looked happy. They looked complete. The caption, "Family First," burned into my retinas. It was a lie. Of course. It should have read, "Some family first" or "The easy family first." I swiped to the next photo. It was a close-up of the food. Artfully arranged plates of eggs Benedict and truffle fries. I swiped again, and then I saw it. The third photo was a funny detail shot. It was focused on a place setting at the end of the table. There was a linen napkin, folded into a swan, there was a full set of silverware, and there was a beautifully handwritten place card, done in the calligraphy script my mother prided herself on learning years ago. The name on the card was Biscuit. Sitting on the chair, looking confused and fluffy, was Delaney's golden doodle. I zoomed in. My mother had set a place at the table for a dog. There was even a small saucer on the charger plate with a few pieces of bacon on it. The caption for this specific photo, added in the comments by Delaney, read, "Even Biscuit knows brunch is mandatory." 3. I felt a sensation that was not quite nausea, but something colder. It was the feeling of ice water being poured down the back of a shirt. They had an empty seat. They had a spot at the table, and they had given it to the dog. It was a joke, I knew. To them, it was just cute content. Look how much we spoil the dog. But the subtext was screaming at me. Biscuit was welcome because Biscuit did not speak. Biscuit did not have a job in compliance. Biscuit did not ask why his name was on a loan document. Biscuit was the perfect Merriweather accessory, cute, obedient, and silent. I was being replaced by a version of a family member that was easier to photograph. I did not throw the phone. I did not cry. In the past, I would have shown Garrett the photo with tears streaming down my face, asking, why do they love the dog more than me? I would have let the humiliation crush me, but this time, the anger that rose up in me was different. It was not hot. It was not volatile. It was absolute zero. It was the kind of anger that cauterizes a wound instantly. I looked at the photo of the dog eating bacon on fine china, and I realized that I was done waiting for an apology. You do not apologize to someone you have replaced with a pet. You do not respect someone you mock so openly. I looked at Garrett. He was watching me, waiting for the fallout. Look, I said. I turned the screen toward him. He squinted at the phone. Is that the dog? Yes, I said. That is Biscuit. He has a seat. Garrett's face went red. That is messed up. Sable, that is really messed up. They did not invite you, but they brought the dog. They did not invite me because they prefer the dog. I corrected. He fits the brand better. Garrett stood up. That is it. I am commenting. I am going to say something. No, I said sharply. I reached out and grabbed his wrist. You will do no such thing. Why not? He demanded. They are bullies. Sable, they are posting this knowing you will see it. It is passive-aggressive garbage. Exactly, I said. And if you comment, if you get angry, if we show any reaction at all, we validate them. We tell them that we are watching. We tell them that they still have the power to hurt us. I lowered the phone. I am not going to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. I said, I am going to give them what they think they want. I opened the family group chat on WhatsApp. It had been dormant for weeks, mostly because I had stopped initiating, and they only used it to summon me for tasks. The last message was from me, 6 weeks ago, asking what time Easter dinner started. It sat there, unanswered in the chat history, a tombstone to my naivety. I clicked on the group info, Merriweather Fam 5 members. I scrolled down to the bottom. The text was red, exit group. My thumb hovered over it. This was the digital equivalent of walking out of the house and locking the door behind you. In the modern world, leaving the group chat is a declaration of war. It is the final severance of the line. I did not hesitate. I pressed it. Delete and exit. The chat disappeared from my feed. I waited. I sat there, staring at the phone, waiting for the inevitable backlash. Surely, they would see the notification. Sable left the group. Surely, Beck would text me within seconds asking what my problem was. Surely, my mother would call, weeping about how I was tearing the family apart. I watched the minutes tick by on the corner of the screen. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, nothing. The phone did not ring. No text messages appeared. I checked my signal. I had full bars. An hour passed. The realization hit me harder than the photo of the dog had. They did not care. Or perhaps, they had not even noticed. There were 4 other people in that chat. They were likely messaging each other in a separate thread. one that excluded me, laughing about the brunch. My departure from the main group was not an explosion. It was a leaf falling in a forest that no one was walking through. The silence was the answer. It confirmed everything. I was not a member of the family. I was a subscriber to their newsletter, and I had just unsubscribed. Garrett was pacing the room, still fuming about the dog. Did they say anything, he asked. No, I said. I put the phone down, and they won't. 2 days later, the notification finally came, but it was not a reaction to my leaving. It was a reaction to their own guilt, timed perfectly to manage their own self-image. It was a text from Janice, individual, not in a group. Hi, honey. We are thinking of doing a Memorial Day barbecue next weekend. Just burgers and hot dogs in the yard. Very casual. Would love to see you and Garrett if you're up for it. No pressure, though. We know how busy you are. Let us know. I stared at the words, no pressure. It was a masterclass in defensive inviting. By adding no pressure, she was preemptively categorizing my presence as a burden. She was implying that asking me to come was an imposition on me, or perhaps an imposition on them that they were graciously tolerating. It gave her an out. If I said no, she could tell everyone I invited her, but she is just too busy. If I said yes, she could treat me like a guest who required special handling because I was so fragile. It was a trap. Garrett read the text over my shoulder. No pressure, he scoffed. After ignoring your birthday, after the dog photo, now they want burgers. He grabbed his own phone. I am going to reply. I am going to tell her that we are busy because we are recovering from the fact that you guys are sociopaths. Garrett, stop. I said. My voice was tired. I walked over to him and took the phone from his hand. I saw the fire in his eyes. He was a protector. He wanted to fight the dragon, but he did not understand that this dragon fed on fire. I have to handle this, I said. But how, he asked. By letting them walk all over you, Sable. You have to set a boundary. I am setting a boundary, I said. But boundaries are not walls you scream over. They are lines you do not cross. I looked at him. I saw the fatigue in his face. He was exhausted by my family. He was exhausted by the cycle they hurt me. I cried. He got angry. I defended them or minimized it, and we all pretended it was fine until the next holiday. I realized then that I had been using him as an emotional buffer. I had been making him carry the anger I was too afraid to express. I am sorry. I said to him, for what? For making you deal with this. I said, you are right to be angry. But if I react to this text with emotion, I lose. They want me to be the dramatic one. They want me to send a long paragraph about how hurt I am so they can show it to Aunt Carol and say, see, Sable is off her meds again. So what do? Garrett asked. I looked at my mother's text. No pressure. I typed my reply. We have plans. Enjoy the BBQ. I did not offer an excuse. I did not say sorry. I did not say, maybe next time. I did not ask how they were. I hit send. It felt terrifying. It was against every instinct I had been raised with. I was raised to please. I was raised to soften the blow. I was raised to apologize for existing. But the moment the message delivered, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. I turned to Garrett. New rule, I said. He looked at me, waiting. From now on, I only respond to truth. I said, what does that mean? It means if they want to act, they can act alone. I said, if they send me a text that is a performance like pretending they didn't forget my birthday, or pretending that inviting me is no pressure, I give them nothing. I give them the bare minimum. I will not feed the beast. Garrett looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, he said. Truth only. He picked up the remote and turned on the television. We sat there in the living room, the evening light fading outside. I checked my phone one last time. Janice had replied to my rejection with a thumbs-up tap-back. That was it. No, oh, that is too bad. Or, we will miss you. Just a thumbs up. She was relieved. She had done her duty. She had issued the invite. I had declined, and now she could host her barbecue without the daughter who asked too many questions. And she could tell everyone that she had tried. Let her have her narrative. I looked at the blank wall where I used to hang the family calendar. I was not in the photo. I was not in the chat. I was not at the barbecue. I was becoming a ghost in my own history, and for the first time. I realized that ghosts have a unique advantage. Ghosts are invisible. Ghosts can walk through walls, and ghosts can watch without being seen. I opened my laptop and logged into the county clerk's public records database. I did not need an invitation to see what was happening with the family property. I did not need a login to the group chat to understand the trajectory of their finances. If they wanted to replace me with a dog, that was fine. But they were about to learn that while a dog might sit nicely at the table, a dog cannot read the fine print. And I could. I typed in my father's name into the search bar. Gordon Merriweather, search. The results began to load. I was done being the daughter. I was now the auditor, and the audit was just beginning. The notification arrived on a Thursday afternoon at 2:17 while I was reviewing a flagged transaction log for a pharmaceutical client. My phone, which sat face up on my desk at Northbridge Compliance Systems, did not ring, it did not chirp, it gave a single, distinct haptic thud that I had assigned to only one application, my Identity Theft Protection Service. I froze. My hand hovered over the mouse. In my line of work, paranoia is not a personality flaw. It is a job requirement. I spend 40 hours a week hunting for money laundering schemes, unauthorized transfers, and regulatory breaches. I know exactly how easy it is for a life to be dismantled by a single compromised Social Security number. I picked up the phone. Alert new hard inquiry detected. My stomach tightened. A hard inquiry meant that someone was applying for credit in my name. It was not a background check for a job. It was not a pre-approval offer. It was an active request for lending. I tapped the notification. Lender Oak Valley Regional Financial, date May 28th, type mortgage/real estate. I stared at the screen. I was not buying a house. I was not refinancing. Garrett and I had locked in our mortgage rate 3 years ago, and we had not touched it since. I swiped over to the details. The inquiry had originated from a branch in Naperville. The air in my office suddenly felt very thin. Naperville. I unlocked my workstation and opened a new browser window. I did not panic. I went into triage mode. I was no longer Sable the daughter. I was Sable the senior compliance analyst. I navigated to the DuPage County Recorder of Deeds website. Public records are the great equalizer. People can lie about why they canceled a dinner. They can lie about who was invited, but they cannot lie to the county clerk when they are recording a lien against a property. I typed in the address of the house I grew up in. The brick colonial on Maple Avenue, where I had learned to ride a bike and where I had been uninvited from Easter. Search. The results populated in a neat, chronological list. There was the original deed from 1992. There was the release of the mortgage from 2010. And there, at the very top of the list, was a new filing. Document type home equity line of credit, HELOC adjustment. Recording date, March 29th. I did the math in my head. March 29th was the day before Easter. The butt dial happened on Easter Sunday. I clicked on the PDF icon to view the document image. I paid the $5 fee without blinking. The document loaded, page by scanned page. It was a standard agreement securing a line of credit for $250,000 against the equity of my parents' home. My father's signature was there, looking shaky but legible. My mother's signature was there, practiced and looping. I scrolled down to the addendums. Usually, these pages contain notary acknowledgments or property descriptions, but on page 14, I stopped. It was a rider regarding successor beneficiaries and guarantor assets. There, typed in standard 12-point Times New Roman font, was a name. S. M. Thornwick. It was not a signature. I had not signed this. But my name, my married name, combined with my maiden initial, was listed as a contingent asset holder with a Social Security number partially redacted, but ending in the same 4 digits as mine. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. They had listed me. They had used my information to bolster the application. They had likely told the loan officer that I was a silent partner or a future guarantor to get the approval pushed through. That explained the credit inquiry. The bank was finally getting around to vetting the contingent names on the file. I sat back in my chair. The office hummed around me, printers whirring, phones ringing, but I was in a vacuum. This was fraud. It was soft fraud. Familial fraud. The kind that happens every day in America. But it was fraud nonetheless. And suddenly, the Easter phone call replayed in my head with terrifying clarity. Don't mention the bank papers. She works in compliance. She asks too many questions. They knew. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had cut me from the dinner not because they disliked me, but because they needed to sign these papers with a notary present. And they could not risk me picking up the document and seeing my own name on page 14. I printed the document. I printed the credit alert. I put them in a manila folder. I drove home in silence. I did not listen to the radio. I listened to the sound of the tires on the pavement and the pounding of my own heart. When I walked into the apartment, Garrett was in the living room, folding laundry. He looked up, smiling, but the smile faded the instant he saw my face. Sable. What is it? I walked over to the dining table and laid the folder down. I opened it. Garrett, I said, I need you to think very carefully. He stopped folding a towel. You are scaring me. I need you to tell me about every conversation you have had with my mother in the last 6 months. Not the pleasantries, not the weather. I need to know if she ever asked you about money. Garrett frowned. He looked confused. Money, no. I mean, not really. Think, I commanded. My voice was sharp, sharper than I intended. He rubbed the back of his neck. Well, she called me back in January, or maybe February. She asked how we got our mortgage approved so fast. She said they were thinking of doing some renovations. I stared at him. Go on. She asked about debt-to-income ratios, Garrett said, shrugging. She wanted to know if a parent's assets could count for a child's business loan, or something like that. It was vague. Did she ask about me? I asked. Garrett paused. He looked at the ceiling, searching his memory. Yeah. She asked if your name was on the deed to our condo, and she asked if you had frozen your credit. I felt the blood drain from my face. And what did you tell her? I told her no. You hadn't frozen it, Garrett said. He looked defensive now. Why would I lie? I thought she was just being a mom. I thought she was reading some article about identity theft and wanted to make sure we were safe. I closed my eyes. She was not checking my safety. Garrett, I said softly. She was checking the lock on the door before she broke in. I turned the folder around and pushed it toward him. Look at page 14. Garrett walked over. He looked down at the paper. He read the name. He read the social security digits. Did you sign this? He asked. No. But this is a loan, he said. For $250,000. Yes. Garrett looked up at me, and I saw the horror dawn in his eyes. He realized what he had done. He had given them the green light. He had confirmed that my credit was accessible. He had been the unwitting accomplice. I am sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. Sable. I swear I didn't know. I know you didn't. I said, that is why they asked you. Because you are honest. Because you trust them. I sat down at the table. I felt heavy. And that is why they said, don't let Garrett know on the phone. I said, it wasn't about the dinner. It was about this. They knew if you knew they were using my name, you would stop it. Garrett sank into the chair opposite me. He looked sick. They are stealing from you. They are leveraging me. I corrected. They are using my creditworthiness as a backup parachute for whatever financial cliff they are jumping off. But why? Garrett asked. They have money. Your dad has a pension. Why do they need $250,000 in cash? I looked at the document again. The loan was not for a renovation. It was a cash-out HELOC. That meant they were taking the equity out of the house and putting it into a bank account. Where was the money going? I stood up. I went to my laptop. I opened the folder I had named Static. I had been saving everything, every email, every text, every Venmo transaction I could see on the public feed. I searched for Delaney. Delaney had been talking about a project for months. She called it her brand expansion. She had been vague about the details, posting photos of fabric swatches and office spaces on Instagram. I searched the Illinois Secretary of State Business Entity Database. Entity name D.M. Lifestyle Group, LLC. Manager Delaney Merriweather. Status not good standing. There was a red flag next to the file. I clicked deeper. Delaney's LLC was 6 months behind on filing fees. There was a lien recorded against the business from a commercial landlord in Chicago. Amount $45,000. I kept digging. I checked the court records for Cook County. There was a lawsuit filed in January. A vendor was suing DM Lifestyle Group for unpaid inventory. Amount $80,000. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening snap. Delaney was drowning. Her brand was a shell company full of debt. She was about to be evicted, sued, and exposed as a fraud. So she went to Mommy and Daddy, desperate to protect the image of the golden child. Agreed to bail her out. They mortgaged the house to pay off her debts. But the bank probably balked. They probably looked at my parents' age and their fixed income and said the risk was too high. They needed a younger guarantor, someone with a steady income, someone with a perfect credit score. Me. But they knew I would say no. They knew I would ask to see the business plan. They knew I would find the lawsuits. So they didn't ask. They just took. I looked at Garrett. Delaney is broke. I said, the money is for her. They are using the house to pay her debts, and they are using my name to secure the house. Garrett slammed his hand on the table. That is illegal. You have to call the police. You have to call the bank. No. I said, why not? Garrett shouted. He stood up and paced the kitchen. This isn't a snub. Sable. This is a crime if I call the bank now. I said, keeping my voice low and steady. They will freeze the application. They will investigate. My parents will claim it was a clerical error. They will say they meant to ask me and forgot. They will gaslight the bank just like they gaslight me. And then they will call me and scream that I tried to send my father to jail. I looked at the pile of papers. I need more. I said, I need to prove intent. I need to prove that they knew exactly what they were doing. I pulled up the screenshot of the butt dial log. Duration 3 minutes, 42 seconds. I pulled up the text from Delaney. Don't mention the bank papers. I pulled up the credit inquiry. I started a new document. I titled it Timeline of Unauthorized Access. I listed every interaction. I listed the date Garrett spoke to Janice. I listed the date the loan was applied for. I listed the date of the Easter dinner. I was building a case. This was not a family dispute anymore. This was a forensic audit. Garrett watched me typing. He looked terrified. He had never seen me like this. He was used to the Sable who cried when her feelings were hurt. He did not know the Sable who hunted down discrepancies for a living. What are you going to do? He asked. I stopped typing. I looked at him. I am going to let the loan go through. I said, what I need the money to move. I explained. I need the transaction to be finalized. Once the funds are dispersed, once the money moves from my parents' account to Delaney's account, then I have the trail. Then I have proof of where the money went. But your name is on it, Garrett argued. My name is on the addendum. I said, it is not a signature. I can dispute it later. I can prove I wasn't there. I was at home, 90 miles away. I have the location data from my phone to prove it. I turned back to the screen. I am going to wait. I said, I am going to let them dig the hole. And when they hand the shovel to Delaney, I am going to take a picture. I felt a strange sense of calm. The hurt was gone. The sadness about the Easter dinner had evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard clarity of numbers. They thought I was the weak link. They thought I was the fragile one who just wanted to be invited to the party. They had no idea that while they were playing house, I was reviewing the blueprints. I saved the file. I looked at the date on the calendar. The loan would likely close in 2 weeks. That meant the money would hit Delaney's account by mid-June. I had time. I picked up my phone. I saw a text from my mother, sent 2 hours ago. Did you get the invite for the BBQ? Let us know XOXO. I looked at the XOXO, kisses and hugs, from the woman who had just sold my financial identity to save her favorite child. I did not reply. I moved the text to the static folder. Then I opened my banking app and set up a daily alert for any changes to my credit report. I looked at Garrett. "Do not say a word to them," I said. "Not about the loan, not about the call. Act like everything is normal." He nodded. He looked pale, but he nodded. "I promise." "Good," I said. I closed the laptop. The hunt was on. And for the first time in my life, I was the predator, not the prey. I did not go to therapy to fix my family. You cannot fix a house that was built on a sinkhole. You can only evacuate the residents. I went to therapy to learn how to pack my bags. My therapist was a woman named Dr. Aris. She had a sharp, no-nonsense demeanor that I appreciated. In our first session, she asked me what my goal was. I sat in her beige armchair, clutching my purse like a shield, and told her I wanted to stop feeling crazy. We did not spend hours crying about my childhood. Instead, we spent hours defining terms. Doctor. Aris was like a linguistics professor teaching me a new language. She gave names to the invisible currents that had steered my life for 34 years. Triangulation. That was what happened when my mother called Garrett to ask about my credit instead of asking me. Gaslighting. That was the peaceful Easter voicemail. Scapegoating. That was the role assigned to me. Not because I was defective, but because the family system required a trash can for its collective anxiety. It was clinical, it was precise, and it was incredibly liberating. Labeling the dynamic stripped it of its mystical power. It was no longer a confusing fog of love and hurt. It was a textbook pattern of dysfunction. I was not the problem. I was simply the component of the machine designed to absorb the shock. I left those sessions feeling exhausted but clear-headed. I began to apply this new clarity to my marriage. Garrett and I had to retrain ourselves. We had been trained by the Merriweathers to be available, to be pliable, and to be reactive. We had to break those habits. We established a new protocol for the phone. If Janice called, we did not answer. We let it go to voicemail. We listened to the message, transcribed the essential information if there was any, and replied via text. No spontaneous emotional audits, no ambushes. At first, Garrett struggled. He flinched every time the phone rang. He felt rude. He felt like he was violating a social contract. But I reminded him that a contract requires two willing parties, and my family had violated the terms long ago when they tried to mortgage my identity. I changed my physical routine as well. For years, my body had been a vessel for anxiety. I carried my shoulders high, my jaw clenched, always bracing for a blow. I decided I needed to occupy my own skin differently. I joined a gym. I did not go to do cardio or to lose weight to look better in family photos. I went to work with weight imbalance, craving the solid pushback of metal against my palms. I wanted to notice my body working. The tight pull in my muscles discomfort I chose for myself. Discomfort that meant something. I began making food for my own enjoyment, not dishes meant to impress or follow tradition. I cooked fiery curries my mother would have disapproved of. I tossed together pastas thick with garlic. I ate however I pleased, sometimes with my hands, simply because I could. I took evening walks. I moved through my Milwaukee neighborhood as porch lights flicked on one by one. A quiet sense of belonging settled over me. This pavement was mine. This air was mine. My lungs filled freely, without asking or waiting for approval. But recovery doesn't move in a straight path. It loops and bends. And every so often it brings you back to a place that still aches. It happened on a Tuesday night in June. Garrett and I were clearing the table after dinner. He'd been withdrawn all day, weighed down by a guilty hush, the kind that usually meant something had gone wrong. "Sable," he said, putting down a dish towel. "I need to tell you something." I stopped loading the dishwasher. I looked at him. My heart rate did not spike. I was getting better at regulating my nervous system. "What is it?" I asked. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. He looked miserable. "A few months ago, back before Easter, when you were feeling really down about them, I messaged Delaney. I felt a cold prickle on my skin." "You did what I wanted to fix it," he said, his voice pleading. "I thought she just didn't understand. I thought if I explained to her that you were struggling, she would step up. I thought she would be a big sister." I stared at him. Garrett was a good man, but his goodness was sometimes a liability. He projected his own empathy onto people who were incapable of it. "Show me," I said. He handed me the phone. I scrolled back to a thread from March. There was Garrett's message. "Hey Delaney, just a heads up. Sable is having a hard time lately. She feels a bit left out. Maybe give her a call. She really looks up to you." It was sweet. It was pathetic. It was ammunition. I looked at Delaney's reply. "OMG, thanks for telling me. Garrett, I totally get it. She has always been so sensitive." Right. It is exhausting. Honestly, I walk on eggshells around her. Glad you see it too. We just have to be gentle with her. I read the text twice. Glad you see it too. She had taken Garrett's plea for kindness and twisted it into a validation of her own narrative. She had turned my husband into a witness for the prosecution. She had likely shown this text to my mother and said, "Look, even Garrett thinks she's having a hard time. Even Garrett says she feels left out. She is the problem." I looked up at Garrett. He was waiting for me to yell. He was waiting for the old Sable, the one who would have cried about the betrayal. But I did not cry. I handed the phone back to him. "I am not mad at you," I said. My voice was level. "But I want you to read that again. Really read it." He looked at the screen. "She didn't ask how I was." I pointed out, "She didn't ask what she could do. She thanked you for agreeing with her that I am difficult. She used you to confirm that I am the unstable one." Garrett stared at the words. I saw the realization wash over him. He looked sick. "She played me." He whispered, "Yes," I said. "She played you. You tried to appeal to her empathy, but you just fed her ego." Garrett sat down at the kitchen table. He put his head in his hands. "I am so sorry. Sable, I just wanted peace." I sat down across from him. "There is no peace with people who profit from war. Garrett, you cannot mediate with a sniper. You just have to get out of range." That night, something shifted in our marriage. Garrett finally stopped trying to be the bridge. He realized that a bridge connects two sides. But in this landscape, one side was trying to set the bridge on fire while he was still standing on it. He stopped suggesting we send cards. He stopped asking if we should call. He joined me in the silence. I took the next step in my reconstruction. I stopped the nice efforts. June was my niece's birthday. Usually, I would spend weeks researching the perfect gift. I would buy something educational and expensive. I would wrap it in beautiful paper. I would drive it to Naperville. This year, I did nothing. I did not buy a gift. I did not send a card. It felt wrong at first. It felt mean. The child was innocent, but I realized that my access to the child was controlled by the parents. My gift would not be seen as an act of love for my niece. It would be seen as a tribute paid to Delaney. It would be an admission that I was still seeking approval. So I stopped paying the tax. I stopped liking the photos on Facebook. I stopped commenting beautiful on my mother's garden pictures. I stopped sending the obligatory happy anniversary texts to my parents. I withdrew my energy. And in the space where that energy used to go, I found I had a surplus. I started volunteering at a neighborhood food pantry on Saturday mornings. It was physical work. Unpacking boxes, sorting cans, breaking down cardboard. It was unglamorous and real. That was where I met Tessa Rowan. Tessa was 50 years old, divorced, with a laugh that sounded like sandpaper and a heart that was surprisingly soft. She didn't care about appearances. She wore oversized t-shirts and swore when she dropped a pallet of beans. We were taking a break one morning, drinking bad coffee on the loading dock. I had been vague about my family situation, but that day, I let a little bit slip. I told her I was tired of trying to prove I was a good person to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. Tessa looked at me over the rim of her styrofoam cup. "Honey," she said, "you are trying to be the lead actress in a movie where you were cast as an extra." I blinked. "What?" "It is their movie," she said. "They wrote the script. They built the set. In their movie. You are the supporting character who creates conflict so the hero can look good. You are never going to win an Oscar in that film. You just need to walk off the set and go make your own movie." The words hit me with the force of a revelation. I had been trying to rewrite their script. I had been trying to convince them to give me a better role, but Tessa was right. I did not need to change their minds. I just needed to leave the theater. I am not a supporting character. I whispered. No. Tessa grinned. You are the director. Act like it. That conversation was the cornerstone of my new life. I began to build a chosen family. It was not a dramatic announcement. It was a slow accumulation of genuine connections. I invited Tessa to dinner. We drank wine and laughed about nothing. I started talking to my colleagues at Northbridge Compliance Systems about things other than work. I found out that the quiet IT guy, David, loved vintage horror movies, just like I did. We started a movie night. I reconnected with a college friend I had let drift away because my family demanded so much of my time. Slowly, the empty chairs at my table began to fill up. These people did not know me as the fragile one. They did not know me as the scapegoat. They knew me as Sable. They knew me as the woman who made great curry, who understood mortgage fraud, who had a dry sense of humor. They liked me. And the most shocking part was that I did not have to perform for them. I did not have to bring the perfect ham. I did not have to suppress my opinions. I could just be. By mid-July, I felt different. I felt solid. The phantom pain of the amputation was fading. I was sleeping through the night. I was not checking the static folder every day. I was checking it once a week, like a chore, and feeling less and less emotion with every click. The loan had gone through. The money had moved. I had the documents saved. But even that felt like a distant project, something I would deal with when the time was right. For now, I was just enjoying the peace. And then, of course, the universe tested me. It was a Saturday afternoon. Garrett and I were hosting a small barbecue in our backyard. Tessa was there. David was there. It was loud. It was happy. There was no tension. There were no hidden agendas. My phone was inside, charging on the kitchen counter. I went inside to get more ice. I saw the screen light up. It was not a text. It was a call, Mom calling. And then, a second later, a text from Delaney. Hey, are you guys home? We are in the neighborhood. Thought we would stop by. I stared at the phone. They were in Milwaukee. They were 90 minutes away from their kingdom. They never came to Milwaukee. In 10 years. My parents had visited my apartment exactly twice. But now, after 3 months of silence, after I had stopped chasing them, after I had stopped feeding them my energy, they were here. They sensed it. They sensed that I had walked off the set. They sensed that they had lost their audience. And narcissists cannot survive without an audience. If the scapegoat stops bleeding, the wolves get hungry. I looked out the window at my backyard. I saw Garrett laughing with Tessa. I saw the smoke rising from the grill. I saw the life I had built. It was fragile. In its own way, it was new. And they were at the gate, ready to trample it. I did not pick up the phone. I did not text back. I walked to the back door and locked it. Then I walked to the front door and locked the deadbolt. I went back out to the yard. Everything okay? Garrett asked. Seeing my face, I took a deep breath. The Merryweathers are circling. I said, but the fortress is secure. I picked up my drink. Let them knock. I said, I am not home. But inside, I knew this was not just a visit. This was a reconnaissance mission. They were coming to see if I was broken. They were going to be very disappointed to find that I was not only whole, but I was armed with the one thing they feared more than anything else: indifference. And of course, a folder full of bank documents that proved they were frauds. But they did not know that yet. I took a sip of my drink and smiled at Tessa. So, tell me more about that movie, I said. The phone inside rang again. I let it ring. It was just sound. It was just static. And I had learned to tune it out. The envelope arrived in the mail on a Tuesday, sandwiched between a utility bill and a coupon for a car wash. It was thick, creamy, and textured, the kind of paper that costs more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Garrett Ashmere in calligraphy that was so ornate it bordered on illegible. I knew immediately what it was. Or rather, I knew who it was from. Only the Merriweathers sent mail that felt like it should be handled with white cotton gloves. I carried it into the kitchen and set it on the counter. I did not open it immediately. I made myself a cup of tea. I watched the steam rise. Then, with the precision of a surgeon, I slit the top of the envelope with a letter opener. Inside was a cardstock invitation, edged in gold foil, the DM Lifestyle Group. Cordially invites you to the annual late summer benefit night, celebrating innovation, community, and family. August 24th, 7 o'clock in the evening, the Grand Ballroom at the Hotel Ariston. I scanned the details. The Hotel Ariston was one of the most expensive venues in Chicago. It was marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and waiters in white tuxedos. It was the kind of place you booked when you wanted to scream to the world that you had money to burn. And then, at the bottom, in a font size just small enough to be tasteless, were the instructions. Black tie optional. Please adhere to a neutral color palette. This event is photo-friendly. I let out a short, dry laugh. Photo-friendly. It was not a party. It was a photo shoot with witnesses. They were telling the guests how to dress so they would not clash with the decor in the Instagram posts. We were not people to them. We were aesthetic choices. We were background actors who needed to blend in with the floral arrangements. I flipped the card over. There was a handwritten note from my mother. Sable, I really want you to come. It would mean so much to have the full family there. We need a full presence for Delaney. No pressure. But please try. There it was again. No pressure. And yet, the underlying demand was as subtle as a brick through a window. Full presence. Not, we miss you. Not, we want to see you. But, we need a full presence. She needed the set to be complete. She needed the visual evidence that the Merriweather clan was intact, supporting Delaney's empire. Garrett walked in a few minutes later, tossing his keys on the hook. He saw the invitation sitting on the counter like an unexploded ordnance. What is that? He asked. And summons. I said. He picked it up. He read it. He snorted when he saw the photo-friendly line. Are they serious? He asked. Neutral color palette. What happens if I wear a blue tie? Do I get kicked out? You ruin the brand. Garrett, I said, you disrupt the visual harmony of Delaney's success. He tossed the card back onto the counter. So, we are not going. Right? I looked at the gold foil shimmering under the kitchen lights. Logic dictated that we throw it in the trash. We had established boundaries. We had pulled away. We were happy in our silence. Going back into the lion's den, especially for an event designed to worship Delaney, seemed like madness. But something nagged at me. Why this event? Why now Delaney's business was failing? I knew that. I had the public records in my static folder proving she was drowning in debt. I knew my parents had taken out $250,000 against their home to bail her out. So why throw a party that must cost at least $50,000 if you are broke? You do not rent the Hotel Ariston. You do not print gold foil invitations. Unless the party is the con. I walked over to my laptop. I need to see something. I said, I Googled the event name, DM Lifestyle Summer Benefit. A splash page came up. It was glossy, filled with stock photos of smiling people holding champagne flutes. There was a paragraph about fundraising for future entrepreneurs and empowering visionaries. It was a word salad of corporate buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing. I scrolled down to the section titled, Our Committee. I expected to see Delaney's name. I expected to see Beck's name. I expected to see a few of her influencer friends, but as my eyes scanned the list, my heart stopped. There, listed fourth from the top, was a name that made the blood freeze in my veins. Sable Thornwick, Senior Compliance Advisor. I stared at the screen. I blinked, thinking perhaps I was projecting, that my paranoia was hallucinating text. But no, it was there, black and white. They had listed me as a committee member, and not just a member and advisor. They were using my job title. They were using the credibility of my career. A career built on ethics and legal adherence, to vouch for this sham of an event. Garrett came up behind me. He looked at the screen. He saw my name. He let out a low whistle. They didn't. They did. I whispered. I scrolled further. There was a link to a PDF sponsorship packet, the kind sent to potential corporate donors. I clicked it. On page 3, under Governance and Oversight, my name appeared again. Our allocation strategy is overseen by a board of experienced professionals, including Sable Thornwick, compliance analyst. I sat back in my chair. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its criminality. They knew investors were wary of Delaney. She had a reputation for being flighty, for spending money on clothes instead of product. So how do you calm nervous investors? You tell them that the finances are being watched by a professional. You tell them that the sister, the boring one, the one who works for a major compliance firm, is on the board. They were selling my integrity to buy Delaney another 6 months of delusion. Garrett's face was hard. This is why they want you there, he said. It is not about the family photo. No, I agreed. It is not, if you don't show up. He continued, connecting the dots, and a donor asks to meet the compliance advisor. Then the lie falls apart. I finished. They need me physically present to validate the name on the brochure. They need me to shake hands and smile and look boring and responsible so that people will write checks to Delaney. I looked at the invitation again. Formal attire, photo-friendly. They did not want me. They wanted a cardboard cutout of me that could breathe. Garrett looked at me. So, we are definitely not going. We should call a lawyer. We should send a cease and desist. I sat there, thinking, if I sent a cease and desist, they would pull the brochure. They would cry. They would say it was a misunderstanding, a placeholder text they forgot to delete. They would spin it. They would say I was trying to sabotage Delaney out of jealousy. And if I didn't go, they would make excuses. Sable is sick. Sable is busy. They would keep the lie alive. No, I said. I looked at Garrett. We are going. He looked at me as if I had lost my mind. What? Why Sable? They are using you. I know. I said. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the summer twilight. I am going because I am done being erased. Garrett, but I am also done being used. If I stay home, I am invisible. If I send a lawyer, I am the aggressor. But if I show up, I turned back to him. If I show up, I am the evidence. I walked back to the counter and picked up the RSVP card. It was small, elegant, with a pre-stamped envelope. I took a pen. I did not write a note. I did not write, looking forward to it, or can't wait. I checked the box marked, accepts with pleasure. I wrote 2 on the line for number of guests, and I signed my name, Sable Thornwick. I sealed the envelope. Garrett watched me, concerned. You are playing a dangerous game. Sable, if you go there, they will swarm you. They will love bomb you. They will try to pull you back in. Let them try. I said. I dropped the envelope on the table. They think they are inviting the old Sable, the one who is grateful to be included, the one who will stand in the back and nod. They do not know who is coming to dinner. I picked up my phone. I have work to do. I said, I did not mean office work. I meant the work of preparing a defense. If I was going to walk into a room where my name was being used to commit fraud, I was not going to walk in naked. I needed armor, and I needed ammunition. I spent the next 3 days in a state of cold, efficient hyperfocus. I printed the brochure. I printed the website screenshots. I printed the timeline of the loan. I created a digital folder on my phone, accessible with a single tap, containing every piece of evidence I had gathered since Easter. Then, I thought about the witness problem. At the Easter dinner, I had been alone on the phone line. It was my word against theirs. At this gala, it would be my word against the entire Merriweather machine. I needed a neutral party, someone who could see, record, and verify, but who was not emotionally compromised. I remembered a photographer Garrett had used for a corporate headshot a few years ago, Miles Keene. He was expensive, he was cynical, and he was excellent. He did event photography, but his style was more photojournalism than wedding portraiture. He caught the moments between the smiles. He caught the tension. I looked up his number. Garrett. I said, I want to hire Miles. To take pictures of us, Garrett asked. To take pictures of everything. I said, I am going to tell Delaney that we wanted to gift her a candid photographer for the night. A surprise. She will love it because she loves being photographed. And really, Garrett asked, really? I want him to document the reality. I said, I want pictures of who talks to whom. I want pictures of their faces when they see me. I want a record that doesn't go through the Merriweather filter. I called Miles. I booked him. I paid the deposit myself. Then, I texted Delaney. RSVP is in the mail. We will be there. Her reply came within 30 seconds. Yay, so glad you are coming. It is going to be magical. Wear something chic. I stared at the exclamation points. The relief was palpable. She wasn't happy I was coming. She was happy her cover story was secure. She had her compliance advisor. The fraud was safe. I felt a strange sense of detachment. In the past, receiving an invite like this would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety. I would have worried about my weight. I would have worried about what to say. I would have spent hundreds of dollars on a dress to try to fit in. This time, I felt nothing but a cool, predatory focus. I went to my closet. I did not go shopping. I pulled out a dress I already owned. It was a navy blue sheath, structured, severe, and expensive. It was not photo-friendly in the flowy, pastel way Delaney wanted. It was the kind of dress you wear when you are firing someone. I looked at myself in the mirror. I am not coming to be loved. I told my reflection. I am coming to be counted. Garrett came into the bedroom. He sat on the edge of the bed. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. You know they are going to try to parade you around. Janice is going to link arms with you and drag you to every donor in the room. I know. I said, and what are you going to do? I am going to tell the truth. I said, not a scene, not a scream, just the truth. If someone asks me how long I have been on the committee, I will tell them. If someone asks me about the fund allocation, I will tell them. Garrett looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. You are going to blow it up, he said. No, I said, smoothing the fabric of the dress. I am not lighting the fuse. Garrett, I am just refusing to carry the water buckets anymore. If the house catches fire, it catches fire. I looked at the date on the invitation. August 24th, 2 weeks. They were spending the money they had stripped from their home to throw a party to hide the fact that they had no money. It was a snake eating its own tail. And I was the only one with a knife. I opened my static folder one last time. I checked the RSVP list on the event website. My name was already there. Bold and official. Sable Thornwick. They had stolen my name. They had stolen my credit. They had stolen my sense of belonging. But they had made a critical error. They invited me back to the scene of the crime. And this time, I was bringing the lights. The dress was not a statement of fashion. It was a statement of jurisdiction. I stood before the full-length mirror in the hotel suite we had rented for the hour, smoothing the fabric down over my hips. It was midnight blue, a shade so dark it flirted with black under low light but struck a distinct, commanding navy when hit by a flashbulb. It had long sleeves, a high neck, and a back that plunged just enough to be elegant without being inviting. It was structured, architectural, and severe. It was not the dress of a sister who had come to clap. It was the dress of an auditor who had come to inspect the books. Garrett stood behind me, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but there was a tightness around his eyes that I knew well. He was terrified. He felt like we were walking into a lion's den wearing stakes as neckties. Do I look okay? He asked, his voice low. You look perfect. I said. I turned to face him. You look like a man who owes them nothing. I checked my clutch. Inside, I had my phone, lipstick, and a slim folded printout of the event brochure where my name was listed as an advisor. It was my ticket and my weapon. We went down to the lobby at 7:10 in the evening. The invitation said 7 o'clock. In the Merriweather world, arriving on time was expected. Arriving early was eager, but arriving 10 minutes late was a power move. It meant you had other places to be. It meant the event started when you walked through the door. Miles Keene was waiting for us near the revolving doors. He was dressed in all black, blending into the shadows like a lens-bearing ninja. I had paid him a deposit of $500, with the rest due on delivery. Remember, I told him, leaning in close so the valet wouldn't hear, I do not want portraits. I do not want smiles. I want the room. I want the body language. If someone rolls their eyes, I want it. If someone turns their back on me, I want it. Miles nodded, checking his ISO settings. You want the documentary edit? Got it. I am a fly on the wall. We walked toward the ballroom. The doors were open, spilling golden light and the sound of a string quartet into the hallway. The air smelled of expensive lilies and desperation. I took Garrett's arm. Ready, I asked. He exhaled a long breath. No, good, I said. Neither are they. We stepped into the room. The Hotel Ariston ballroom was a cavern of gilt and crystal. There were at least 200 people inside. Round tables were draped in champagne-colored silk. The centerpieces were towering arrangements of white hydrangeas, Delaney's favorite, because they photographed well and took up space, for a moment. Nobody noticed us. The hum of conversation was a steady drone. Then, my mother saw us. She was standing near the bar, holding court with a group of women I recognized from her garden club. She froze mid-gesture. Her eyes widened, scanning me from head to toe. She took in the navy dress, the sharp blowout of my hair, the way I was standing with my chin slightly raised. She tapped Delaney on the shoulder. The ripple effect was immediate. Delaney turned, Beck turned, my father turned. The room did not go silent, but the temperature in our corner seemed to drop 10 degrees. Delaney moved first. She crossed the room with the speed of a heat-seeking missile wrapped in chiffon. She was wearing a pale pink gown that sparkled under the chandeliers, looking every inch the princess of the evening. Sable, she cried out. Her voice was pitched high, designed to carry. She reached me and threw her arms around my neck. It was not a hug, it was a tackle. She squeezed me so hard I could feel the sequins of her dress scratching against my neck. It was a possessive embrace, a physical claim. She was showing the room that we were close, that the rumors of a rift were unfounded. She was locking the door with flowers. I did not hug her back with the same intensity. I kept my arms loose, my posture rigid. Hi, Delaney, I said. She pulled back, but kept her hands on my shoulders, pinning me in place. Her smile was blinding, but her eyes were darting around my face, looking for cracks. You came, she gushed. I was so worried you would get caught up with work. You look intense. I look appropriate. I said. She laughed. A brittle sound. You look chic. Very corporate. It fits the brand. She waved at Miles, who was already snapping photos from a discreet distance. Who is this? A gift. I lied smoothly. Garrett and I hired him for the night. Since you are so busy, we thought you would want someone to capture the candid moments, so you do not have to worry about your phone. Delaney's face lit up. Oh, that is genius. I love that. Make sure he gets my good side. She turned to the room, still gripping my arm. Everyone, my sister is here. My mother arrived next. Janice Merriweather did not run. She glided. She looked impeccable in silver, but I could see the tension in the set of her jaw. She stopped in front of me. She did not say, I missed you. She did not say, I am sorry I forgot your birthday. She did not say, thank you for coming. She reached out and adjusted a strand of my hair. A grooming gesture that established dominance. You look beautiful. Sable, she said. Her voice was low. Stand near me later when the photographer comes around. We need a shot of the three women. It was a command, not a request. I was a prop to be positioned. I will be around, I said noncommittally. Gordon Merriweather loomed up behind her. My father looked tired. His tuxedo seemed a size too large, as if the stress of the secret loan was eating him away from the inside. Hello, princess, he said. It was the nickname he used when he wanted something. Hi, Dad. He looked at Garrett. He did not smile. He looked at Garrett with the desperate intensity of a man who needs a co-conspirator. Garrett, good to see you. Gordon said. He clamped a hand on Garrett's shoulder. His grip looked painful. Walk with me for a second. I want to introduce you to someone near the bar. Garrett looked at me. Panic flashed in his eyes. Go ahead, I said coolly. I will be fine. I watched them walk away. Gordon steered Garrett not toward the bar, but toward a quiet alcove near the emergency exit. I saw Miles raise his camera and snap 3 rapid frames of their retreating backs. The body language was clear, a warden escorting a prisoner. I was alone in the center of the room, or rather, I was alone in a room full of people who had been briefed on me. I moved toward the bar. I needed water. I needed to clear the taste of Delaney's perfume from my throat. As I waited for the bartender to pour a sparkling water, a woman standing next to me turned. She was older, draped in heavy pearls, with the kind of helmet hair that costs $300 a week to maintain. I recognized her vaguely as Mrs. Vanderhoven, a wealthy donor who had been in my mother's orbit for years. You must be Sable, she said. I nodded politely. I am. Good evening. She looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and pity. I am so glad you made it, she said, leaning in conspiratorially. Janice told us you have been struggling with crowds lately. I stiffened. Crowds. Did she? I asked. Yes, Mrs. Vanderhoven continued, lowering her voice. And with the family dynamic, it is so brave of you to come out tonight. I know how hard it can be when you feel disconnected. She patted my hand. It is okay not to like family events. Dear, some people just aren't built for loyalty. The words hung in the air, suspended between the clinking of glasses. Not built for loyalty. I felt a cold rage crystallize in my chest. They had not just said I was busy. They had painted a portrait of a sullen, ungrateful daughter who hated her own blood. They had inoculated the donors against anything I might say. If I looked unhappy, it was because I was struggling. If I spoke out, it was because I hated family. It was brilliant. It was evil. I smiled at Mrs. Vanderhoven. It was a smile that did not show teeth. That is an interesting perspective, I said. Actually, I am here in a professional capacity tonight. Oh, she asked. Yes, I am on the advisory committee for the compliance oversight. I watched the confusion ripple across her face. Compliance, she repeated. Janice didn't mention that. She said you were taking a break from work. I took a sip of my water. Mom gets confused sometimes, I said softly. You know how she is. I walked away before she could respond. I left her standing there, the seed of doubt planted. I circulated through the room. I felt like a shark swimming through a reef. I did not eat. I did not drink alcohol. I watched Beck holding court at a table of young women, laughing too loudly. I saw him check his phone constantly, his eyes darting to the door as if he owed money to someone waiting outside. I watched Delaney working the room. She was manic. She grabbed donors by the arm, laughing, touching, promising. She looked like she was on a high wire without a net, and I watched the way they treated me. Whenever a photographer from the local paper came by, not Miles, but the official press, my mother would materialize at my elbow. Sable, get in here, she would chirp. She would pull me into the frame. She would squeeze my waist. She would smile her dazzling, matriarchal smile. Click, and the second the flash went off, she would release me and turn her back. That is great. Thanks, she would say to the photographer. Ignoring me completely, I was a cardboard cutout. I was being used to sell the lie of unity. Miles was capturing all of it. I saw him near the buffet, photographing my mother turning away from me. I saw him capturing the look of disdain on Beck's face when I walked past his table. I saw him capturing the moment a waiter offered me a tray and I declined, while Delaney knocked back her third glass of champagne in the background. 30 minutes later, Garrett reappeared. He looked shaken. What happened? I asked, pulling him into the shadow of a pillar. Your dad. He whispered. He asked me if we had received any mail from the bank. I narrowed my eyes. Which bank? Oak Valley, the lender. And I told him no. Garrett said, I stuck to the script. I said we get so much junk mail we probably threw it out. Good. What did he say? He looked relieved. Garrett said, but then he asked if I could loan him $5,000, just for a bridge until the event money clears. I closed my eyes. They had burned through the $250,000 already. The hole was deeper than I thought. Did you give it to him? No. I told him our liquidity is tied up in investments. Good man. I said. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The quartet stopped playing. A spotlight swept across the room and landed on the small stage at the front. Delaney walked up to the microphone. The applause was polite. Dutiful. She tapped the mic. Hello, everyone, she beamed. Her voice echoed through the speakers. Thank you all for coming to the DM Lifestyle Summer Benefit. She launched into her speech. It was a rehearsed monologue about passion, vision, and the future. She used words like synergy and legacy. It was hollow, but she delivered it with the conviction of a televangelist. My mother and father stood near the stage, gazing up at her with adoring eyes. This was the return on their investment. This was what they had bought with their home equity, a moment of applause for their golden girl. I stood at the back, near the exit, with Garrett. I wanted to leave. I had seen enough. I had the photos. I had the brochure in my purse. I had the confirmation that the donors viewed me as the problem child. I was ready to go. And then, Delaney went off script. You know, she said, her voice dropping to a husky, emotional register. None of this would be possible without family. Family is the bedrock of everything I do. She looked out into the crowd. She scanned the room, and her eyes landed on me. I felt a prickle of danger on the back of my neck. We have gone through so much this year, she said, but we always come back together, and I am so touched that my sister, Sable, is here tonight. The spotlight swung. It blinded me. I blinked, shielding my eyes. 200 heads turned to look at me. Sable has always been my rock. Delaney lied. Even when we disagree, she is there, and I want her to come up here and just say a few words about what this family means to her. My blood ran cold. It was an ambush. If I refused, I proved the rumor true. I was the difficult, hateful sister who refused to support the family. If I went up there, I would be forced to lie. I would be forced to grab the microphone and gush about how wonderful Delaney was, effectively co-signing the fraud in front of everyone. Sable Delaney called out, extending a hand. Come on up. Don't be shy. The crowd applauded. They were cheering for the reconciliation. They were cheering for the scene. I looked at Garrett. He looked terrified. Don't go, his eyes said. I looked at my mother. She was nodding encouragingly. Her eyes hard as flint. Get up there, her face said. Play your part. I looked at Miles. He was standing near the stage, his camera raised. He was waiting. I took a breath. I had two choices, run or play. But I realized there was a third choice. I could walk onto the stage, I could take the microphone, and I could tell the truth. Not the angry truth, not the screaming truth, but the cold, hard, compliance officer truth. I smoothed my dress. I stepped away from the wall. I did not smile. I did not look shy. I walked toward the stage with the steady, rhythmic click of my heels on the marble floor echoing in the silence between the claps. I saw the relief on Delaney's face as I approached. She thought she had won. She thought the pressure of the spotlight would force me into submission. She thought I would crumble and give her the soundbite she needed. She had forgotten who I was. She had forgotten that while she was playing house, I had been reading the contracts. I walked up the stairs. The light was hot on my face. Delaney handed me the microphone. Her hand was damp. Thanks, sis, she whispered. Off mic. Just keep it short. Make me look good. I took the microphone. It was heavy. Cold metal in my hand. I turned to face the room. I saw the sea of expectant faces. I saw Mrs. Vanderhoven. I saw the bankers. I saw my parents, clutching each other's hands, waiting for their absolution. I waited for the room to go completely silent. Then I raised the microphone to my lips. I smiled, and for the first time that night, the smile reached my eyes, because I knew that what I was about to say was not what they wanted, but it was exactly what they deserved. The silence that followed my statement was not empty. It was heavy. It possessed a physical weight. Like a sudden drop in barometric pressure before a tornado touches down. I had not screamed. I had not thrown my drink in Delaney's face. I had not wept about being excluded from Easter dinner. I had simply stood there, in my navy dress, and delivered a definition. Family is not an image. Family is a responsibility. I handed the microphone back to Delaney. Her hand was trembling. She gripped the metal handle, her knuckles white, her mouth frozen in a smile that was rapidly losing its structural integrity. She looked at me with eyes that were wide with panic. She was waiting for the punchline. She was waiting for the, and that is why we are so proud of Delaney follow-up, that would smooth everything over. I did not give it to her. I turned around. I walked down the 3 steps of the stage. My heels clicked against the wood, a steady, rhythmic metronome counting down the seconds of their comfort. I did not look at my mother. I did not look at my father. I looked straight ahead at the exit sign glowing red in the distance. Garrett met me at the edge of the crowd. He did not say a word. He simply offered me his arm, his face a mask of stone. We walked through the ballroom, parting the sea of donors and hangers-on. I could feel their eyes on us. I could hear the whispers starting, low and buzzing, like a hive of disturbed wasps. What did she mean? Is something wrong? Who was that? We reached the lobby. The air was cooler here, stripped of the scent of lilies and anxiety. We walked out the revolving doors and into the humid Chicago night. Drive, I said. Garrett handed the valet ticket to the attendant. 5 minutes later, we were merging onto the interstate, the city lights fading in the rearview mirror. I did not relax. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins. Cold and sharp, I pulled my laptop out of my bag. I had a hotspot connection. The car was dark, lit only by the passing street lamps and the glow of my screen. "What are you doing?" Garrett asked, keeping his eyes on the road. "I am closing the loop," I said. I opened my email client. I did not use my personal email. I used the account I had set up specifically for this purpose, the one that filtered into the static folder. I composed a new message. To Janice Merriweather, Gordon Merriweather, CC, Delaney Merriweather. Subject: formal inquiry regarding corporate materials. Urgent. I typed the body of the email with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. Dear Janice and Gordon, tonight, at the DM Lifestyle Benefit, I observed that my name, professional title, and employer affiliation were listed in the distribution materials as a member of the Compliance Advisory Committee. I also noted my name listed as a guarantor in the sponsorship packet. As we have no record of any written agreement, consent form, or board appointment regarding my participation, I am requesting immediate written clarification. Please provide the date and documentation where I authorize the use of my professional credentials for this venture. Please respond in writing by 5 o'clock tomorrow evening. Regards, Sable Thornwick. I hit send. It was a declaration of war written in Helvetica. By asking for written clarification, I was forcing them to admit one of 2 things: either they had forged my consent, or they had none. Both were damning. The reaction was almost instantaneous. My phone, which I had placed on the dashboard, lit up. It was Delaney. I did not pick up. Then a text came through. WTF Sable. I watched the screen. You just embarrassed me in front of everyone. Mom is crying in the bathroom. People are asking me what you meant. I did not reply. And now this email. Are you serious? You are ruining my career. Do you know how bad this looks? If the investors see this, I am dead. I stared at the words. Ruining my career. I am dead. There was no, I am sorry. There was no, we shouldn't have used your name. There was only the panic of a narcissist who realizes the mirror has cracked. She was not afraid of losing her sister. She was afraid of losing her funding. The email had terrified her more than my absence at Easter ever could. Because the email threatened the only thing that mattered to them, the image. Garrett's phone buzzed in the cup holder. He glanced down. It is your dad. Read it. I said. Garrett tapped the screen. He sighed. A sound of deep, exhausted frustration. Garrett, we need to talk. Man to man. Sable is having an episode. You need to step up and control this. We are a family. We help each other when things get tough. Don't let her burn the house down. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Control this. They were trying to bypass me again. They were trying to appeal to Garrett's sense of masculine duty, painting me as the hysterical woman who needed to be managed by the rational men. Do not reply. I said, I am not going to. Garrett said. He reached over and turned his phone off. He threw it into the back seat. I am done helping them. We drove in silence for another 20 miles. I looked out the window. I felt a strange sense of sorrow. It was not the sorrow of loss. It was the sorrow of confirmation. I had given them a chance. If they had come to me tonight and apologized, if they had admitted the lie, I might have stopped. But they hadn't. They had doubled down. I opened a new tab on my browser. I navigated to the Consumer Dispute Portal for the National Credit Bureau. I logged in. I found the inquiry from Oak Valley Regional Financial dated May 28th. I clicked the button marked Dispute. A form appeared. Reason for dispute. I selected the option from the drop-down menu. I have no knowledge of this inquiry. In the comments section, I typed, I did not apply for credit with this institution. I did not authorize any party to use my information as a guarantor or co-signer. Please investigate. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. This was the point of no return. Once I clicked Submit, the Bureau would notify the bank. The bank's fraud department would open a file. They would pull the loan application. They would see the clerical error regarding my name. They would call my parents. And because the loan was already funded, they would freeze the line of credit immediately pending an investigation. The money Delaney was using to pay for the venue, the champagne, and the lies would be frozen. I thought about the dog sitting at the table. I thought about the fragile comments. I thought about the no-pressure text. I clicked Submit. Your dispute has been filed. Case number 89442. It was done. The first domino had been tipped. I closed the laptop. We got home at 1 a.m. I was exhausted, but my mind was wired. I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the couch. My email pinged. It was a WeTransfer link from Miles Keene. Subject: the unfiltered edit. I opened the folder. There were 400 photos. Miles had understood the assignment perfectly. These were not the photos that would end up on Facebook. These were the photos that told the truth. I clicked through them slowly. There was a photo of me standing alone at the bar. In the background, my mother was leaning in to whisper something to Mrs. Vanderhoven, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes darting toward me. It looked exactly like what it was gossip. There was a photo of Garrett and my father. My father had his hand on Garrett's shoulder, his face looming close, aggressive. Garrett looked trapped. You could see the discomfort in the set of his jaw. There was a photo of Delaney on stage. She was smiling, but Miles had caught her in a moment where the smile didn't reach her eyes. She looked manic, desperate. And then there were the photos of the reunion, Delaney hugging me. Her hands were clawed into my shoulders. My arms were stiff at my sides. My mother adjusting my hair. Her face was cold, critical. My face was blank. It was a portfolio of performative love. It was proof that I was not crazy. Anyone looking at these images could see the tension. They could see the isolation. I was standing in the middle of my family, yet I looked like a stranger they were tolerating. I needed to be sure. I selected 10 of the most telling photos. I forwarded them to 3 people. First, to Mark, a friend from law school who specialized in family trusts. Second, to Sarah, a colleague at Northbridge who had a background in forensic accounting and psychology. Third, to Tessa. I added a simple message. Am I imagining this? Mark replied in 10 minutes. Despite the late hour. Sable, that photo of your dad cornering your husband, that is intimidation, and your mom looks like she is handling a prop. Not a daughter. This is visceral, Sarah replied. The body language is screaming. You are disassociated in every shot. They are swarming you. It is classic narcissistic supply extraction. You look like you are being eaten alive. Tessa called. I picked up. Girl, she said. her voice rough with sleep but sharp with anger. "I am looking at the one where your sister is hugging you. She looks like she is trying to strangle you with sequins, and you look like a hostage." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "So it is real?" I asked. "It is real," Tessa said. "You are not the villain in this movie. Sable, you are the prop they are furious they can't control. And that speech you gave, I wish I had been there to see their faces. You dropped a bomb and walked out." "I didn't feel like a bomb," I said. "I felt sad." "That is because you are grieving," Tessa said gently. "You are grieving the family you wished you had. But the pictures prove that family doesn't exist. You did good. Now go to sleep." I hung up. I felt a strange sense of validation. The photos were my reality check. I saved them to a folder named Evidence. I tried to sleep, but at 3 a.m, the phone began to ring. It was the landline. We hadn't used the landline in years, but my parents had the number. They knew I turned my cell phone off. It rang, and rang, and rang. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Garrett shifted beside me. "Do you want me to unplug it?" he asked. "No." I said, "Let it ring." It stopped. Then it started again. Janice. She was spiraling. She had probably seen the email. She might have even received an automated alert from the bank if their systems were fast enough. She was losing control, and her instinct was to reach out and strangle the source of the dissonance. Finally, at 4:15 a.m, the ringing stopped. My cell phone lit up on the nightstand, a single text message. I reached over and picked it up. It was from Mom. It was not a long paragraph. It was not a guilt trip about the party. It was not a defense of Delaney. It was a question that she had likely spent 4 hours debating whether to ask. A question that cut through all the noise and went straight to the heart of the matter. "You were listening, weren't you?" I stared at the screen. She knew. She had finally done the math. She had connected the fragile comment to my withdrawal. She had connected the loan discussion to my email about the board. She realized that the butt dial on Easter had not gone to voicemail. She realized I had been on the line. She was admitting it. By asking if I was listening, she was admitting there was something to hear. She was admitting that the conversation I had overheard, the mockery, the plotting, the exclusion had actually happened. She wasn't denying it. She was just terrified that I had the receipts. I felt a surge of triumph, but it was cold, like ice water. I did not reply. I did not need to reply. My silence was the answer. I took a screenshot of the text. I added it to the folder. I put the phone back on the nightstand. I closed my eyes. The dominoes were falling. The bank would be calling them in the morning. The investors would be asking questions about the compliance advisor who had sent a legal inquiry, and Janice Merriweather knew, finally, that her daughter was not fragile. Her daughter was a witness. And the witness had just taken the stand. The request for a meeting came 3 days after the gala. It did not come from my mother. It came from my father, sent via email to my personal address, not the one I had burned with the legal demand. "Sable, we need to sit down. No lawyers, just family. We need to clear the air before this destroys everything." I read the email to Garrett. We were sitting on our balcony, drinking coffee. The morning air was crisp, hinting at autumn. "Do you want to go?" Garrett asked. "I do," I said, but not on their terms. I replied with a location and a time. I chose a steakhouse in Oak Brook. It was expensive, quiet, and excessively public. It was neutral ground. It was also halfway between our homes, a geographical compromise that signaled I was no longer willing to go the extra mile for them. I also added a condition: Garrett is coming, and if anyone raises their voice, we leave. They agreed. We arrived at the restaurant exactly on time. I wore a gray suit, the kind I wore to board meetings. Garrett wore a blazer. We looked like a team. We looked like a united front. As the hostess led us to the private room they had reserved, I felt a familiar knot of tension in my stomach, but I breathed through it. I reminded myself of the folder in my bag. I reminded myself of the photos. The hostess opened the door. I stopped. My parents were there. Delaney was there, but they were not alone. Sitting at the end of the table was Mrs. Higgins, a senior deacon at my parents' church, a woman who had known me since I was 5 years old, and next to her was a man I recognized as Delaney's business mentor, a slick-haired consultant named Marcus. I looked at Garrett. He tightened his grip on my hand. They had brought an audience. They had turned a family meeting into a tribunal. They had brought Mrs. Higgins to shame me into submission with religious guilt, and Marcus to intimidate me with business jargon. I almost turned around and walked out, but then I realized that this was better. If they wanted witnesses, I would give them witnesses. I walked in. I did not kiss anyone on the cheek. I did not smile. "Hello, everyone." I said, "Sable." My mother said. She stood up. She was wearing black, as if she were in mourning. She reached for me, but I took a seat on the opposite side of the table, pulling the chair out with a scraping sound that cut through the room. We sat. The silence was thick. The waiter came in, poured water, and sensed the hostility immediately. He retreated without asking for orders. Janice started. She did not start with an apology. She started with tears. "I just don't understand," she sobbed, looking at Mrs. Higgins for validation. "I don't understand how a daughter could be so cruel. We invited you to the gala. We wanted to honor you, and you stood up there and humiliated us. You made me look like a failure in front of my friends." She paused, waiting for the guilt to hit me. I stayed silent. "You sent that email," she continued, her voice rising. "Threatening us, threatening your own sister Sable. We are family. We don't sue each other. We don't dispute credit checks. You are trying to destroy us over a misunderstood dinner invitation." Mrs. Higgins leaned forward. Her face was a mask of pious concern. "Sable, honey," she said softly, "your mother is heartbroken. The Bible says to honor your parents. Surely whatever misunderstanding happened at Easter can be forgiven." I looked at Mrs. Higgins. Then I looked at Marcus, who was watching me with a smug expression, ready to explain to me how business works. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a thick black binder. I placed it on the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "I am glad you brought guests," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when presenting audit findings to a CEO, because I think they should see what they are defending. I opened the binder. I did not act out of cruelty. I said, I acted out of self-defense. I slid the first document across the table toward Mrs. Higgins. "This is a transcript," I said, "on Easter Sunday. Mom called me to cancel dinner. She said it was a quiet day. Then she accidentally dialed me back 3 hours later." Mrs. Higgins picked up the paper. I heard the prayer. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, "I heard my father thank God for the whole family. I heard them laughing, and then I heard them discussing how to hide financial documents from me." My mother went pale. "You were listening," she whispered. I ignored her. I slid the next document toward Marcus. "This is a credit inquiry from Oak Valley Financial," I said, "dated 2 days after Easter. It lists me as a guarantor for a $250,000 line of credit against my parents' home." Marcus looked at the paper. His smug expression faltered. "I did not sign this," I said. "I was not asked. My name was used to bypass a risk assessment because my sister's credit is ruined." "That is a lie," Delaney shouted. She jumped up. Her face was red. "We were going to ask you." "It was just a placeholder. It is bank fraud," I corrected her. "And since I work in compliance, if I know about it and do not report it, I am an accessory. I filed the dispute to protect my license." "Delaney, not to hurt your feelings." I looked at my father. He was staring at the tablecloth. He looked old. He looked defeated. Then Garrett spoke up. He had been silent until now, observing, but now he leaned forward, and his voice was shaking with a suppressed rage that I had rarely seen. "And there is one more thing," Garrett said. He looked at Janice. "You called me in January. Janice, you asked me about Sable's mental health. You told me she was unstable. You told me she was having episodes." Janice blinked. "I was worried about her." "No," Garrett said sharply. "You were grooming me. You were planting the seed that Sable was crazy, so that if she ever found out about the money, I wouldn't believe her. You tried to turn me against my own wife to cover your tracks." The room went dead silent. Mrs. Higgins looked at Janice with a new expression. It wasn't support anymore. It was horror. Using a husband against a wife was a violation of the sanctity she preached about. "Gordon, Mrs. Higgins asked quietly, "Is this true?" My father sighed. It was a long, rattling sound. "We had to," he said. He looked up. His eyes were wet. Delaney was going to lose the business. He said, "The creditors were calling. They were going to seize her assets. We needed the cash, but the bank wouldn't give it to us on our income alone. We needed a third signature. So you stole mine," I said. "We didn't steal it," he insisted. "We borrowed it. We were going to pay it back before you ever knew. And Easter," I asked. "Why cancel Easter? Because you would have asked," Gordon admitted. He looked at me, and for the first time, he was honest. "If you had come to dinner, you would have seen the stress. You would have asked about the house. You handle audits for a living. Sable, you smell fear. We couldn't have you in the room while we were signing the papers." I sat back. There it was. It wasn't that they didn't love me. It was that my competence was a threat to their corruption. They had excluded me because I was the only one in the family who lived in reality. Delaney, seeing the tide turn, tried one last desperate maneuver. "Sable, please," she said. Her voice broke. "It was just for a few months. Just until the summer fundraising season was over. I swear, once the gala was done, I was going to call you. I was going to make it up to you. We were going to be a family again." I looked at her, and in that moment, she handed me the final key. "You were going to make it up to me after the season," I repeated. "Yes," she said, nodding eagerly. "So I am seasonal," I said. I looked around the table. "I am not a daughter to you people." I said, "I am a resource. When you need money, you use my credit. When you need credibility, you put my name on a brochure. When you need to hide a crime, you uninvite me. And when you need to feel better about yourselves, you decide to make up with me." I stood up. I picked up my purse. I left the binder on the table. "Con, you are making a mistake," Janice pleaded. She stood up, reaching for me. "We love you." I looked at her. I looked at the tears that I now knew were just a defense mechanism. "I don't need you to love me, Mom," I said. The room held its breath. "I just need you to stop using me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single white envelope. I placed it on top of the black binder. "This is a letter from my attorney," I said. "It states that any future use of my name, my image, or my credit will result in immediate litigation. It also states that all future communication must go through his office." "Sable, don't do this," my father said. "It is done," I said. I turned to Mrs. Higgins. "It was nice seeing you. Mrs. Higgins, I hope the church enjoys the donation Delaney was planning to make with my credit rating." I turned to Garrett. "Let's go." We walked out. We walked past the hostess station. We walked out into the parking lot. The night air hit my face, cool and clean. I did not cry. I did not shake. I felt lighter than I had felt in 35 years. Garrett unlocked the car. He looked at me over the roof. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked back at the restaurant. I could see them through the window. They were arguing now. Marcus was looking at the documents with a panicked expression. Mrs. Higgins was putting on her coat. The image was shattering. "Yes," I said, "I am free." Epilogue. 1 year later, the morning sun was streaming through the windows of our new house. We had moved 3 months ago, further north, to a place with a big yard and no memories. The kitchen was chaotic, but it was a good chaos. Tessa was chopping vegetables at the island, telling a loud, raucous story about her ex-husband. Miles was there, showing Garrett a new lens he had bought. David from work was setting the table, placing napkins that were mismatched and colorful. There was no ham. We were making tacos. There were no assigned seats. There was no dress code. There was no prayer performed for an audience. I was standing at the stove, stirring the meat. I felt a pair of arms wrap around my waist. Garrett kissed my cheek. "Happy Easter." He whispered, "Happy Easter." I said. My phone, which was sitting on the counter, began to buzz. The room grew a little quieter. Tessa stopped chopping. Garrett looked at the screen. It was a picture of a woman with a forced smile. Mom calling. It was the first time she had called in 6 months. The legal letter had done its job, but holidays have a way of making narcissists feel sentimental. Or perhaps they just needed something new. Maybe Delaney was in trouble again. Maybe they needed a new loan. Or maybe she just wanted to see if the door was still unlocked. I looked at the phone. I remembered the feeling of the cold kitchen floor when I listened to the butt dial. I remembered the sound of their laughter. I remembered the name of the dog on the place card. I looked at Tessa, who was watching me with a protective glint in her eye. I looked at Garrett, who was ready to do whatever I wanted. I reached out. I did not answer. I did not decline. I simply flipped the phone over, face down. The buzzing was muffled against the granite. "Who is it?" David asked. "No one," I said. "Just static." I turned back to the stove. "Pass the cheese, please," I said. The buzzing stopped. The room filled with laughter again. And in that moment, surrounded by people who knew me, who saw me, and who asked for nothing but my company, I realized that the best revenge wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't a scene in a restaurant. It was this. It was the absolute, terrifying power of not caring anymore. I had taken my seat at the table, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Sable's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Juliet Revenge Stories. Like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.